Chapter 1, The Grand Wedding Day. Today was the grand wedding day of Grace Flowers, eldest daughter of the Flowers. The Flowers were forming a marriage alliance with the third prince, a prince of frail health and little real power in the imperial court, yet deeply favored by the emperor. The Flowers were a prestigious martial arts family, holding a firm position in the Jianhu, with all in the martial world heeding their command. Everyone said the Jianhu and the imperial court were two entirely separate forces, with no prior precedent of intermarriage, making everyone curious and speculating about the reasons behind this union. The third prince's residence, typically quiet, was filled with joyous bustle for the first time. Grace Flowers sat within the bridal palanquin, the constant sound of drums and horns echoing in her ears. A satisfied smile played on her lips. She had arrived in this world just yesterday, replacing Grace Flowers of the same name, and today she was to marry in her stead. But, excellent, everything was proceeding smoothly according to her plan. Although the original Grace Flowers' father had always been indifferent towards her, the formalities and betrothal gifts were not at all perfunctory, but rather quite grand. The palanquin stopped, and firecrackers exploded, the sharp sounds piercing her eardrums. The bridal palanquin halted before the gates of the prince's residence. "The bride has arrived, the bride has arrived." A chorus of cheers erupted outside the palanquin. "Your Highness, kick the palanquin. Quickly welcome the bride into the residence for the ceremony." A middle-aged woman's voice rang out, undoubtedly the matchmaker presiding over the wedding. A foot clad in a red shoe gently kicked the palanquin curtain. A feather-light kick, accompanied by a man's weak cough, made Grace Flowers inwardly understand, indeed, the third prince's health was a concern. The palanquin curtain was lifted, and a slender, pale hand, its bones prominent, extended towards Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers looked up, peering through the thick veil, unable to see the man's face clearly. Yet, this slender, pale hand didn't evoke any aversion in her. The aura emanating from him was incredibly gentle, devoid of any hostility. Grace Flowers was very pleased. As long as the third prince wasn't difficult, her mission would be easily accomplished. She placed her hand in the outstretched one. Touching it, she was startled. This hand bore calluses from martial arts training and wielding weapons, yet its temperature was rather low. "Your Highness, quickly lead the bride out. The auspicious hour is approaching, we must prepare for the wedding ceremony." The matchmaker's voice interrupted Grace Flowers' thoughts. She yielded to the third prince's pull, stepping out of the palanquin. A series of elaborate wedding rituals followed, leaving Grace Flowers dizzy until they were finally completed. The matchmaker's words, "Escort them to the bridal chamber," brought her a sigh of relief. Finally, the ordeal was over, Grace Flowers sighed. The third prince, Justin Lawrence, heard Grace Flowers' unconcealed sigh, a hint of amusement flickering in his gentle eyes. He recalled Leo Harper's words from earlier, that marrying Grace Flowers was like finding a treasure. It seemed this young lady was indeed quite different from other noble ladies. Two maidservants guided Grace Flowers, leading her through several winding corridors to a room. They helped her onto the bed and then withdrew, leaving her alone. As the maid departed, Grace Flowers swiftly removed her veil, her eyes scanning the room, searching for what she needed. She searched the entire room, yet the Phoenix Dragon goblet she sought remained elusive. Professor Douglas's intel clearly stated the goblet was in Justin Lawrence's possession, and tonight, his wedding night, the ritualistic sharing of wine demanded its use. However, only ordinary goblets, though exquisite, rested on the table, not the Phoenix Dragon goblet. Could Professor Douglas's information be flawed? Impossible. Professor Douglas, from another planet, possessed otherworldly abilities, a grasp of all knowledge, past, present, and future. If he placed the goblet with Justin Lawrence, it must be there. Perhaps Justin Lawrence had concealed it. Grace Flowers sat back on the bed, frowning. Her plan had gone awry. She intended to steal the goblet during the wedding festivities and return to her own time, but now, tonight, escape was impossible. Just as frustration peaked, footsteps approached from beyond the door. "Senior brother, perform well tonight. Don't disgrace us men." A teasing voice echoed. #### Chapter 2, Everyone, settled down. A group surrounded Justin Lawrence, entering the bridal chamber, intent on playful havoc, led by his boisterous junior, Leo Harper. Cough, cough. Suddenly, amidst the clamor, Justin Lawrence erupted in a violent cough, racking his lungs. Hearing this, Grace Flowers felt a sense of relief. Such a severe cough, a fragile breath, a weakened body, she needn't worry about the consummation. "Everyone, quiet down. Let the prince rest," the matchmaker urged, seeing Justin Lawrence's struggle. "Quiet we shall be, senior brother, but only after a penalty drink," Leo Harper chuckled. "Indeed, your highness, a self-imposed penalty is in order," others chimed in. Cough. "Fine, I'll drink." Justin Lawrence's coughing subsided, his voice weak. Grace Flowers froze. His voice, so familiar, resonated with a strange familiarity. The deep timbre, the slight rasp, struck a chord, though she'd never heard him speak before. Through the veil's limited view, Grace Flowers saw snow-white robes approach the small round table holding 2 wine cups and a flask. Leo Harper poured a cup, offering it to Justin Lawrence, now helped onto the bed beside her. "Senior brother," he smiled, "I wish you and sister-in-law 100 years of happiness, and may you soon have a son." Justin Lawrence coughed, accepting the cup. "Thank you, junior brother," he said, draining it. "Well done, senior brother. Now, the ceremonial wine. Drink, and we'll leave you to your affairs." Leo Harper refilled the cups, teasing the newlyweds. Exhausted from the day's events, Grace Flowers longed for rest. Having arrived in this time only yesterday, she'd been unconscious until morning, then rushed here, still adjusting to the temporal shift. 2 sleepless days left her yearning for solitude. So, she reached for the cups before Justin Lawrence could, offering one to him. "Haha, the bride seems eager." "Senior brother, drink up, or we're not leaving," Leo Harper quipped, surprised by her boldness. The others, witnessing her uncharacteristic forwardness, whistled and cheered, the room erupting in renewed merriment. In Justin Lawrence's deep, gentle eyes, a dark storm brewed, stirred by her unexpected action. Amidst the revelry, they shared the ceremonial wine. The matchmaker, deeming the festivities sufficient, ushered the crowd out, leaving the newlyweds in sudden quiet. Grace Flowers ripped off her veil, gazing at Justin Lawrence, struck by his breathtaking beauty. Could such a captivating man exist? His long, dark hair, more luxurious than a woman's, loosely tied with a red ribbon, 2 strands framing his face, lending him a wild allure. Eyes deep as the ocean, captivating, his features sculpted to perfection. Even in his apparent weakness, his beauty remained undiminished, evoking an unexpected tenderness. Grace Flowers sighed, averting her gaze. Such beauty, truly a dangerous thing. Damn it. Justin Lawrence's face flushed crimson. Leo Harper drugged the wine. #### Chapter 3, My Thoughtful Junior, What? Drugged with what? Grace Flowers asked, startled, but feeling no different. Aphrodisiac. Justin Lawrence stood, seemingly struggling with something, and stumbled to the table for a glass of cold water. "Huh. Only you were drugged?" Grace Flowers observed Justin Lawrence's apparent reaction while she felt nothing, figuring Leo Harper knew better than to mess with her vindictive nature. Justin Lawrence nodded, his deep eyes flicking towards Grace Flowers. "Why are you looking at me? I didn't drug you. If you want an antidote, I can find you a woman." Grace Flowers stood up warily, intending to leave. Suddenly, Justin Lawrence rose and pinned her to the bed. "Tonight is our wedding night. Calling in another woman would make us a laughingstock." Justin Lawrence's voice was husky as he pressed against her. Grace Flowers's hands braced against his chest, their bodies flush against each other. She felt something rubbing against her lower abdomen, making her blush. Weren't you too ill for this? Her mind raced. Damn, they lied to her, saying the third prince was too sick for consummation. Looking at the virile Justin Lawrence now, he was clearly healthy. Leo Harper also gave me a tonic. Tonight, you'll be the one working hard. Justin Lawrence spoke frankly, a hint of resignation in his voice. Had he been played? Grace Flowers gaped. Leo Harper was truly wicked, not only using an aphrodisiac but also a tonic. Was Leo Harper worried Justin Lawrence's frail body couldn't handle the aphrodisiac and needed a boost? Your junior is so thoughtful, Grace Flowers couldn't help but sneer. Yes, I'll thank him. Justin Lawrence emphasized the word thank. That brat was getting bolder, daring to scheme against his senior. Justin Lawrence gasped, his lower abdomen burning. He looked down at the woman beneath him, her dark hair fanned out on the bed, framing her small face, delicate eyebrows, smooth skin, cherry lips, and bright eyes. The intelligence she couldn't hide made her delicate features even more captivating. Get up. If you need it, I can find you a woman. I don't care about being ridiculed. After all, she wasn't from this time. Once she found the Phoenix Dragon Goblet, she would leave. What did she care about? Ridicule. Too late. Justin Lawrence lowered his head and captured Grace Flowers' lips. Let go. Her mouth sealed, Grace Flowers couldn't finish her sentence. She couldn't resist. Chapter 4, A Wife's Duty. Instinctively, Grace Flowers reached for her clothes, but Justin Lawrence seemed to anticipate her move. Before she could act, he seized her wrists, pinning them above her head. She tried to use her internal energy to kick him away, but found it blocked. Without it, she was powerless. Little girl, stop struggling. Leo Harper took care of your little problem. Your internal energy is sealed for 12 hours. Justin Lawrence's voice was husky with desire, the fire within him nearly consuming him. Grace Flowers gritted her teeth. That bastard Leo Harper, he even dared to plot against her. Without her internal energy, she was as helpless as a lamb. Don't. Grace Flowers cried out, her face flushed. She tried to break free, but her struggles only fueled the man on top of her. Sensing his growing frustration, she froze, afraid to move. Justin Lawrence took advantage of her stillness. As soon as he released her hands, Grace Flowers rolled off the bed. The moment her feet touched the floor, Justin Lawrence yanked her back, easily restraining her. Bastard, let me go. Grace Flowers looked up, her eyes blazing, but the gentleness she had seen in him was gone, replaced by a raw, domineering intensity. Was this his true nature, or a result of the drugs? Little girl, I can't control myself. I'm just like you. Justin Lawrence felt like a saint for holding back this long. He wouldn't have been so patient otherwise. So. Does that give you the right to treat me like this? Grace Flowers' mind was in turmoil, clinging to modern laws, forgetting this was ancient times. They had performed the wedding ceremony. As his wife, she was expected to obey him. Justin Lawrence was taken aback by her strange logic. A smile spread across his face, now consumed by passion. He leaned down, his husky voice whispering in her ear, "Today, you wore the phoenix crown, rode the 8-man palanquin into the prince's mansion, and bowed before heaven and earth with me. You are my woman now, and you will obey me." He finished with a devastatingly charming smile. The thought struck him, and he paused, surprised by his own patience with this little girl. "Enjoy my ass. Get out." Grace Flowers roared, cursing her luck. She hadn't even gotten what she wanted, and now this. Chapter 5, Forced Purchase, Forced Sale. On the wedding night, Grace Flowers' imperious tone dissolved into ragged, trembling moans. She thrashed against the bonds securing her wrists, desperate to dislodge the head buried in her chest, but her struggles were futile. Justin Lawrence's grip, though not forceful enough to bruise, held her fast. She clamped her legs shut, paralyzed. Like a fish on a chopping block, she was utterly at his mercy. "Don't hold back," he murmured. "Scream if you want to." Grace Flowers glared at him, fury burning in her eyes. So much for his supposed inability to perform. He was clearly a lecherous rogue with practiced skill. She would not give him the satisfaction of a sound. Tonight, she would remain silent. A faint smile played on Justin Lawrence's lips as he observed her defiant expression, a glint of amusement in his eyes. As dawn crept in, a persistent knocking shattered the quiet of the bridal chamber. Both Justin Lawrence and Grace Flowers jolted awake. "Who is it?" Justin Lawrence coughed weakly, his voice a mere rasp. Grace Flowers, still adrift in the remnants of sleep, snapped to full awareness at the sound of his frail voice. Just hours ago, he had tormented her through the night with a relentless passion, only releasing her as exhaustion claimed her near dawn. And now this pathetic wheeze. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. There was nothing weak about his expression, it radiated vitality and smug satisfaction. Damn him, she'd been fooled again by this wolf in sheep's clothing. Grace Flowers fumed, glaring at his blatant charade. Whose brat is this, disturbing the prince and princess's rest at this ungodly hour? The knocking continued, accompanied by the irritated voice of a servant. "I'm looking for my parents." A childish voice, high and lisping, called out from beyond the door. The boy sounded no older than 3 or 4, his tone a blend of innocence and petulance. "This is the prince and princess's bedchamber. If you're looking for your parents, go home. Stop knocking and come with me." The servant's hushed voice indicated he was trying to lead the child away. "I won't go. My parents are inside." Small hands scrabbled at the door, the sound echoing in the room. "This child is impossible. I told you, the prince and princess are inside, not your parents." The servant's voice rose in exasperation. "Wah! My father is the prince. He's inside." The child burst into tears. Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow at the mention of Justin Lawrence being the child's father. Well, she taunted, your bastard son is at the door. Aren't you going to welcome him?" Justin Lawrence merely smiled, feigning another cough. "Little one," he called out, "if you say I'm your father, then who is your mother?" "My mother is Grace Flowers, your princess, of course." "Silly daddy," came the prompt reply, laced with childish reproach. Grace Flowers froze. The child claimed her as his mother. She had just spent the night with Justin Lawrence, and now a son appeared, claiming them both as parents. A surge of curiosity compelled her to see this child who so readily claimed parentage. She pushed back the covers and sat up, a wave of soreness radiating through her body. She shot a venomous glare at the cause of her discomfort. "If you dare touch me tonight," she hissed, "I'll kill you." "Ugh, it hurts." She winced, sucking in a sharp breath. Justin Lawrence gently pressed her back down onto the bed. "Rest," he said softly. "I'll have someone bring you bathwater. It will ease the soreness." He rose and began to dress. "Humph, experienced, aren't we?" Grace Flowers scoffed. He'd ravaged her without a thought for her comfort, and now he played the solicitous husband. What good was this belated concern? "What's this, little one? Jealous?" Justin Lawrence, fully dressed, turned to his new bride, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "We're practically strangers. What have I to be jealous of?" Grace Flowers rolled her eyes. Did he really think one night together would transform her into a demure, subservient wife? "Daddy, Mommy, come out. Justin is hungry." The child, still waiting outside, pounded on the door again. ### Chapter 6, This child is truly arrogant. Justin Lawrence coughed again, his previously vibrant demeanor instantly replaced by a feigned weakness, as if even breathing was difficult. His face took on a sickly pallor, yet he offered Grace Flowers a devastatingly charming smile before turning towards the outer chambers. A truly skilled actor, Grace Flowers thought, observing Justin Lawrence's transformation. He could even control the flush and pallor of his complexion at will. Just what kind of man is he, moreover? Why was Justin Lawrence feigning illness? What unspoken reason lay behind this charade? A flicker of suspicion crossed Grace Flowers' mind. In the main hall, a group of people surrounded a young boy of about 3 or 4 years old. Leo Harper looked at Justin Lawrence, then at the boy, and the more he looked, the more the child resembled Justin Lawrence. "Senior brother, when did you have a son with another woman outside? A bastard son appearing on the second day of your marriage, does sister-in-law know about this?" Leo Harper was deeply worried for Justin Lawrence. Although he had only met Grace Flowers once, he had witnessed her ruthless methods firsthand. The way she had crushed Fiona Flowers' wrist made it clear that this woman was not to be trifled with. His frail senior brother was no match for her. "Fool, who said I'm the son of another woman?" "My mother is Grace Flowers," the boy said, looking at Leo Harper with disdain, his expression full of arrogance. Leo Harper was choked by the boy's blunt words. Looking at the child's current demeanor, he was indeed very much like Grace Flowers, arrogant, contemptuous, and utterly self-assured. "Little brat, haven't your elders taught you not to lie? Sister-in-law is only 17, and you're at least 4 years old, right? How could a young girl give birth to you?" Leo Harper said with amusement. After bathing, Grace Flowers felt much more comfortable, the aches and pains having subsided. Led by a maid to the main hall, before even entering, she heard the confident voice of the little boy, devoid of the fear and timidity typical of other children. She couldn't help but feel a certain admiration for this child. "Mother, come sit here," the boy said, rising from his seat as soon as he saw Grace Flowers appear at the entrance to the main hall. He led her to the long chair where he and Justin Lawrence had been sitting. Grace Flowers assessed the child who regarded her as his mother. He had a round, chubby face and large, bright black eyes. He looked to be only 3 or 4 years old, but his demeanor was remarkably mature and experienced. This adorable child was very endearing, yet the more she looked, the more Grace Flowers frowned, her eyes filled with suspicion towards this strangely appearing child. And the boy's clothing was truly bizarre, not at all the attire of this era. "Hey, do you guys feel like this kid is a combination of senior brother and sister-in-law?" Leo Harper, sitting opposite the child, looked at Justin Lawrence, then at the boy, and then at Grace Flowers. "The eyes are like the prince's, the nose is like the princess." The middle-aged man sitting next to Leo Harper also noticed this similarity. "The forehead is like the prince's," another person also pointed out a resemblance. "The gaze is like sister-in-law's." Leo Harper stroked his chin, unable to contain his astonishment. "Senior brother, this child couldn't be yours and sister-in-law's, could he? Longjia, you can't speak carelessly. Our princess was still a maiden before she married," an old woman anxiously interjected upon hearing Leo Harper's thoughtless words. This matter concerned the honor of the prince and princess, and such reckless talk was unacceptable. She had cleaned the prince and princess's bedchamber this morning and had seen the wedding handkerchief. Grace Flowers looked at Leo Harper, a smile playing on her lips, but her eyes were icy, sending a chill down Leo Harper's spine. He shrank back, not daring to speak carelessly again. "Little brat, how did you enter the prince's estate?" Grace Flowers asked. It wasn't uncommon for people to share similar appearances. A child resembling her and Justin Lawrence wasn't strange in itself, but coming to the prince's estate and claiming kinship was certainly peculiar. "I walked in through the main gate," the child replied matter-of-factly. "Humph, I never thought that such a vast estate, with its defenses, could be so easily breached, even by a child," Grace Flowers said casually. It is this servant's negligence, a failure of proper management. I beg the princess's forgiveness. #### Chapter 7, Mother is a heartless person. Butler Strong, the Kong residence's head servant, hastily knelt. Last night, with the joyous occasion, he'd neglected security, a grave oversight. Fortunately, the intruder was just a child. Had it been someone with malicious intent towards the prince and princess, the consequences would have been dire. The thought sent shivers down Butler Strong's spine. Sister-in-law, don't blame Butler Strong. Last night was your and brother's wedding, everyone in the residence was celebrating and let their guard down. Before, security was so tight a fly couldn't get through. Leo Harper, knowing Grace Flowers' formidable nature, quickly interceded, fearing punishment for Butler Strong. Mother, I think the matter of the three of us shouldn't be heard by outsiders, the little child suddenly spoke, glancing at Leo Harper, seemingly implying he was the outsider. Hey, you little brat, how dare you be so impudent? Who's the outsider? Your father is about to acknowledge me as his sworn brother, you should address me as uncle. If I'm an outsider, then you are too. Who knows if your unclear background means you were planted in the Kong residence. Don't be disrespectful to my sworn brother, Leo Harper grumbled, the child's words were infuriating. Ahem, you two stay here. Justin Lawrence, silent until now, finally spoke. He stood, breathing heavily, as if even that simple act was difficult. Turning to Grace Flowers, he steadied his breath and said, Princess, let's go to the study. Grace Flowers nodded in understanding, instinctively taking the little child's hand and rising. The child, in turn, reached out with his other small hand and grasped Justin Lawrence's dangling hand, and together they walked towards the study. Leo Harper watched their retreating figures, lost in thought. Their backs formed a harmonious picture, like a family of three. But he was certain his sworn brother couldn't have fathered a child in the past few years. Who was this child? Was his purpose here truly just to acknowledge his parentage? Inside the study, Grace Flowers crossed her arms, leaning against the window, watching the small child huddled on the grand chair. Father, Mother, my name is Jason Lawrence, I'm 4 years old. Elder brother brought me here. The little child, not waiting for Grace Flowers to ask, obediently recounted the story. Elder brother? What's his name? Why did he bring you here? Grace Flowers frowned. As suspected, someone had brought the child to the residence. I don't know elder brother's name. I wanted to find my parents, so he brought me here, saying my parents are the prince and princess of the Kong residence. Jason Lawrence shook his head. Then who raised you? Where is that person now? Where did you live before? Grace Flowers continued to question. My parents raised me. I lived at home. The child tilted his head, answering seriously. We've just met, how could we have raised you? Grace Flowers rubbed her forehead, exasperated with the child. Indeed, it was difficult to discern truth from falsehood in the words of a 4-year-old. Wah, Mother, why are you so fierce? Justin is scared, Jason Lawrence pouted, blinking his eyes pathetically. Elder brother also said father would definitely recognize me, but mother might chase me away and not acknowledge me, because mother is heartless, the child continued. Heartless? What scoundrel dared to slander me? Where is he now? Take me to him. Grace Flowers narrowed her eyes. The elder brother this child spoke of was right, she indeed didn't intend to keep the child in the residence, to avoid further complications. She absolutely couldn't allow someone of unknown origin to live in the residence and disrupt her plans, even if it was just a child. Elder brother is gone. If he doesn't appear on his own, no one can find him, the child replied. All right, child, go back to where you came from. This isn't your place. Grace Flowers didn't waste words, nor did she consult Justin Lawrence. She directly issued the order to leave. Mother, you can't chase me away, or I'll reveal your secret. The child, upon hearing Grace Flowers' intention to dismiss him, wasn't the least bit panicked, but instead spoke with utter confidence. Secret? What secret do I have? #### Chapter 8, Brat, you dare threaten me. Grace Flowers scoffed. No one knew she was a soul from another world, let alone her purpose here. How could this little tyke possibly know such secrets? Yesterday, she'd only interacted with the Flowers' servants. Though surprised by her rapid martial arts progress, they hadn't suspected she was an imposter. After all, since falling into the water, she'd remained in bed, never leaving. As for transmigration, forget a child, even if she herself spoke of it, who would believe her? The chubby child clambered down from the grand teacher's chair, tugged at Grace Flowers' robe. Mother, I'll tell you your secret. Grace Flowers glanced at the silent Justin Lawrence, then squatted down. Tell me, what secret do you want to share? The chubby child whispered in her ear. Big Brother said, if I tell you that you're from another world, here to find the Phoenix Dragon Goblet, you'll let me stay. Because you'll be curious about Big Brother, and to find him, you'll need me. He said you're smart and would understand. Grace Flowers was startled. The Big Brother this child mentioned knew she sought the Phoenix Dragon Goblet. Only Professor Douglas and that mysterious person knew. She trusted the professor's discretion, so could it be the mysterious person who spoke? Mother, Jason can stay now, right? The chubby child blinked his large eyes, a smug smile confirming his certainty. He whispered again, also, if you don't let me stay, I'll tell Father you married him to steal his Phoenix Dragon Goblet. Grace Flowers' face darkened. Was she being threatened by a child? Father, Jason's hungry. The child ran to Justin Lawrence, tugging his hand, his childish voice and adorable face a stark contrast to his earlier threat. Princess, do you want to keep this little one? Justin Lawrence smiled at Grace Flowers, leaving the decision to her. Keep. Grace Flowers gritted out the word. The brat was right, she was indeed interested in this Big Brother. Keeping him was key to finding that person. The family of three returned amicably to the main hall. Ahem, let me introduce everyone, this is my child, Jason Lawrence. Entering the hall, Justin Lawrence addressed the curious crowd. Senior brother, even if this child resembles you, you can't just claim him. His origins are unclear, you must be cautious. Leo Harper jumped up in protest. Senior brother, you're too naive, unaware of the wickedness in people's hearts. Grace Flowers almost choked on her own blood at Leo Harper's assessment of Justin Lawrence. Naive? He was a cunning fox and a first-class actor. Justin Lawrence began to explain, then erupted in a coughing fit. Master Harper, His Highness likes the young master and has accepted him. Please don't dissuade him. This old servant thinks the young master is well-behaved, not a bad child. Seeing Justin Lawrence's intense coughing, Butler Strong intervened. Fine, I won't interfere. It's your family matter. Senior brother, don't get agitated. If you want to keep this child, keep him. Leo Harper, frightened by Justin Lawrence's near-death cough, relented. Grace Flowers watched Justin Lawrence with admiration. Truly impressive, his flawless acting, achieving his goal with a few coughs. Aren't you tired? Tired of faking coughs like that? Grace Flowers asked sarcastically. Cough, I'm fine. I've worried my princess. Justin Lawrence's coughing subsided, and he spoke weakly, feigning gratitude. She wasn't worried about him. Grace Flowers was certain he understood her sarcasm. Oh my, senior brother is truly blessed with such a gentle and considerate wife. Leo Harper, observing their apparent harmony, teased, how was your wedding night? His tone was laden with innuendo. ### Chapter 9, Interrogation, Mother and Son Confrontation. Grace Flowers glared fiercely at Leo Harper, her body still aching from the previous night's ordeal, a gift courtesy of Leo Harper, a debt she would not forget. Use kindness, cough, Butler Strong, bring breakfast. Justin Lawrence turned his head and instructed Butler Strong. Yes, Your Highness. Butler Strong immediately withdrew to prepare breakfast. Senior brother, after breakfast, we should also take our leave. Leo Harper said with a smile. Won't you stay a few more days? Justin Lawrence urged them to stay. Master has sent a letter calling us back. A man beside Leo Harper shook his head, explaining the reason. What's so urgent that it requires your immediate return? Justin Lawrence asked suspiciously. What else could it be? Master certainly doesn't want us brothers to stay here and disturb senior brother's newlywed bliss. Leo Harper chuckled. Yesterday's wedding attendees were all close friends and family. Justin Lawrence maintained his usual air of mysterious humility. Even on his wedding day, not everyone could attend. After the banquet ended, only junior brother Leo Harper and his group, due to the long journey, couldn't leave immediately and stayed overnight at the prince's mansion. In a short while, Butler Strong had prepared breakfast, after which Justin Lawrence and Grace Flowers saw Leo Harper off at the gate. Leo Harper looked at Grace Flowers, pulled Justin Lawrence aside, and whispered, Senior brother, sister-in-law seems quite different from the rumors. The day before the wedding, she jumped into the lake to commit suicide because of the forced marriage, but after waking up, she agreed to marry you. Moreover, her martial arts skills are not as rumored to be worthless. I see her skills are even better than yours. If you are bullied by her, remember to come find us. Junior brother worries too much. My princess is a gentle and virtuous woman, how could she bully this prince? Justin Lawrence coughed slightly and said with a smile. Grace Flowers naturally overheard Leo Harper's advice, secretly sneering. It seemed Justin Lawrence had deceived even his own junior brother, making Leo Harper think that Justin Lawrence was a sickly, weak person who needed his protection. After seeing Leo Harper and his group off, Justin Lawrence boarded a carriage, telling Grace Flowers that he had to go out for a while. Grace Flowers planned to take this opportunity to ask the little boy about the big brother, who knew she came from another world. Grace Flowers leaned lazily against the railing behind her, watching the little boy sitting obediently beside the stone table. Now it's just the two of us. Tell me, why did your big brother bring you to Serenity Prince Mansion? And how did you and he meet? Grace Flowers gently asked the little boy. I don't know big brother. Jason Lawrence shook his head. The boy didn't seem to be lying. I went out to look for my parents, and I met big brother on the way. He brought me here. We transmigrated here. What? You're not from this time. So where are you from? Grace Flowers was startled. You mean, that big brother brought you from another time to this time? Yes, he said I could find my parents here, so I came. Jason Lawrence nodded, then continued, I'm from Switzerland, Europe. When you came here, what year was it? There was a place called Switzerland, Europe, so it was from her planet. She didn't know how many years apart it was from her time. Yesterday was June 5, 2030. Grace Flowers froze. The day she transmigrated here was 2024, and this little tyke came from 6 years after her arrival, so who exactly brought him here? How did the person who brought you here do it? Chapter 10. Slowly she came here because the professor used his supernatural ability to send her soul through time, but this little sprout, how did he get here? Did he come through with his body or his soul? Big brother led me into a beam of light, and then suddenly, I was here. Jason Lawrence said excitedly, Mother, it was so magical, the light was warm, and it moved with us. Hearing the child say this, it seems he transmigrated with his body. It's also quite a coincidence that the body her soul entered is exactly the same as her previous appearance, even the name is the same. Mother, Big brother also told me to give you a message. Jason Lawrence suddenly remembered what his big brother had told him. What message? Grace Flowers frowned. It seemed that the person who brought the little tyke to her side had other intentions, but who was it? He said, Mother, don't rush back, the Phoenix Dragon Goblet isn't that easy to find, you have to be patient. Jason Lawrence recounted his big brother's words to Grace Flowers without missing a single word. Suddenly, Jason Lawrence put his small finger to his lips, gesturing for Grace Flowers to be quiet, tilting his head to listen to something. Seeing the little tyke attentively listening, Grace Flowers didn't think much of it, just sank into deep thought. She had only been here for 3 days, and this little sprout appeared, and this little sprout revealed information about that mysterious Big Brother. She originally thought she could easily obtain the Phoenix Dragon Goblet in return. Now it seems, things are not as simple as she thought. Grace Flowers was originally a final-year archaeology student, the precious gem of the Flowers family, but the Flowers encountered a financial crisis. Right when the whole family was in trouble, a mysterious person offered a check with a huge sum of money to help the Flowers overcome the crisis. The condition was that she had to go to an ancient spacetime called the Great HGN Dynasty to find a pair of Phoenix Dragon Goblets. The Great HGN Dynasty is a mysterious country that doesn't appear in official historical texts, but Professor Douglas still found some remaining documents about this dynasty through various channels. This dynasty seemed to have disappeared from the world overnight. One of the research topics Professor Douglas assigned to Grace Flowers was to go to the Great HGN Dynasty to research the reason why this dynasty disappeared, and retrieve the Phoenix Dragon Goblet before it vanished. The time Grace Flowers transmigrated to the Great HGN Dynasty was exactly 3 years before this dynasty disappeared in history, meaning 3 years later, the Great HGN Dynasty would disappear. The time she had in this dynasty was at most 3 years. "Mother, mother, little snake wants to see you." Jason Lawrence's voice rang in her ears, waking Grace Flowers from her deep thoughts. As soon as she looked up, she saw a small green snake, as thick as a finger, its whole body emerald green, raising its head, being held carefully in Jason Lawrence's 2 hands, brought up in front of her, the little snake's mouth almost touching Grace Flowers' nose. "Put it away quickly." Grace Flowers cried out, retreating backward. She was most afraid of these soft, squishy animals. Seeing Grace Flowers' reaction, Jason Lawrence hurriedly took a few steps back. "Mother, you dislike little snake so much, it makes it very sad." Jason Lawrence placed the little snake on the stone table, stroking its head comfortingly. Seeing the little snake nuzzle its head into Jason Lawrence's hand, looking very dejected, completely losing the excitement it had when it raised its head earlier. Chapter 11, This lad is seriously formidable. Goosebumps erupted across Grace Flowers' skin, prickling her flesh. If not for maintaining face before the little tyke, she'd have bolted without a backward glance. "Where did you catch this snake? Release it immediately." Grace Flowers rubbed her arms, a chill crawling down her spine. "Mother, I just heard little snake say it wanted to find you, so I brought it." Jason Lawrence couldn't fathom why Grace Flowers disliked such an adorable little snake. "Don't lie, child. How could you understand little snake? What would it want with me?" Grace Flowers frowned, the sight of the slithering creature making her deeply uneasy. "Mother, I can understand animals and talk to them." Seeing Grace Flowers' disbelief, Jason Lawrence puffed out his cheeks, emitting a series of strange sounds. Beside them lay a lotus pond. In response to Jason Lawrence's peculiar noises, a chorus of croaks erupted from the water, punctuated by splashes as something leaped out. Grace Flowers peered closer. Ugly, slick toads, seemingly comprehending Jason Lawrence's strange calls, hopped towards them. In moments, thousands of toads poured from the large pond, then back in again. "Stop." Seeing the imminent toad invasion, Grace Flowers hastily intervened. "I believe you. Send them back, quickly, quickly." "Oh, all right." Jason Lawrence produced another series of odd sounds, and the toads promptly turned and hopped back into the pond. In a blink, the ground was clear, as if Grace Flowers had imagined the whole thing. Grace Flowers stared at the little boy in astonishment. Could he truly understand animal speech? Command them, even? Or was it mere coincidence? To test this, Grace Flowers inquired, "Can you communicate with all animals? And make them do anything?" All animals listen to me." Jason Lawrence nodded. "Then can you summon other animals?" Grace Flowers pressed further. Without a word, Jason Lawrence shifted to a different set of sounds. As he varied his calls, the surroundings grew increasingly lively. Grace Flowers watched as crickets, earthworms, and unidentifiable insects emerged from the grass below, slowly advancing towards them. From the sky, butterflies and birds flew towards the sound. The sight of creatures crawling and flying, both magnificent and unnerving, left Grace Flowers speechless, stunned by the spectacle. Jason Lawrence ceased his calls, and the earthworms, crickets, and insects froze, halting their advance up the platform. "Mother, do you believe me now? They're all my good friends, so don't be afraid of them, and don't hurt them," Jason Lawrence said. "Tell them to leave, before someone sees." Grace Flowers, regaining her composure, urged him. If the servants witnessed this grand display, they might mistake the little boy for a demon. Soon, the summoned creatures dispersed, and the surroundings returned to their previous tranquility, save for the small snake still coiled on the stone table. Grace Flowers looked at the snake. It lay docilely, curled up, its head tucked into its coils, only its eyes fixed on her. Suppressing the goosebumps the snake evoked, Grace Flowers took a deep breath and asked Jason Lawrence, "What does it want with me?" As if understanding her question, the small snake turned its gaze to Jason Lawrence, its body remaining still, and hissed. "Little Snake says it's a spirit snake from Fairy Mountain, able to understand human speech. It was captured by bad people and brought here, but it escaped. It says you can help it, and asks you to take it back to Fairy Mountain." Jason Lawrence nodded to the snake as he relayed its message, then continued, "Little Snake says it sees you're afraid of it, but it won't hurt you. It says it can hide from you so you won't be scared anymore." Jason Lawrence looked up at Grace Flowers, his face puzzled. "Mother, why are you afraid of Little Snake? It's so well-behaved and adorable. Isn't it lovely? Fairy Mountain. Where was that?" Chapter 12, Even Snakes No Bribery. Regardless of Fairy Mountain's location, she had no time for such trifles, let alone returning this little snake. Her priority was finding the Phoenix Dragon Goblet. Her family's fate depended on it. She feared the mysterious benefactor would withdraw his financial support if she delayed. Without it, her family would face ruin, a thought that hardened her resolve. "Jason, tell it I'm busy and can't take it back. It should find someone else." Grace Flowers rose to leave the pavilion. The little snake darted off the stone table, tiny wings sprouting from its body as it flew towards her. Grace Flowers recoiled. "Stay away from me," she shouted. The little snake stopped mid-air, blocking her path, hissing anxiously. "Mother, Little Snake says you can take it back after you're done. It's very persistent. It'll follow you unless you kill it. It can fly, Mother. Jason's never seen a flying snake. It says it's a spirit snake, so it must have some treasure. Why else would someone capture it?" Jason Lawrence reached out, and the little snake, seeing Grace Flowers wasn't leaving, landed on his palm. Grace Flowers wanted to scream. First, a little rascal, now a snake. It seemed this little snake would haunt her until she agreed to take it to Fairy Mountain. "Mother, it says it might be able to help you if you're ever in trouble," Jason Lawrence relayed, stroking the little snake's unfurled wings. "What can a little snake do for me? If it were so powerful, it wouldn't have been captured," Grace Flowers scoffed. She'd seen countless treasures, only antiques captivated her, not jewels. "Ah, Mother, look!" Jason Lawrence exclaimed, staring at the little snake, which now held a small, translucent red pearl, shimmering in the sunlight. "Trying to bribe me?" "No chance," Grace Flowers sneered. The little snake hissed again. "Mother, don't underestimate this pearl. It can neutralize any poison, and enhance martial arts cultivation." "Wow, such a treasure. Is there only one?" Jason Lawrence asked the little snake. The little snake shook its head, spitting out 2 more pearls. Mother, it says it can produce many. Oh, no wonder those bad guys captured it. If it's true, they could get rich selling these pearls. The little rascal, seemingly convinced, popped a pearl into his mouth. Don't eat it. Grace Flowers cried, but Jason Lawrence was too quick. Ugh, hot, he exclaimed, immediately sitting cross-legged, circulating his breath as a warmth spread through his dantian. Grace Flowers reached for him, worried, but the little snake flew between them, shaking its head at her and nodding at Jason Lawrence. Seeing Jason Lawrence simply meditating, his expression normal, she calmed slightly. Then, white smoke began to rise from his head, carrying a potent internal force, gradually enveloping him. After a while, the smoke dissipated, and Jason Lawrence stood, his face flushed, his eyes bright. Wow, Mother, my internal energy has increased. He struck a palm towards the lotus pond, sending a 3-foot-high wave of water into the air. The little snake, holding a red pearl, flew to Grace Flowers, its round snake eyes pleading and ingratiating. ### Chapter 13, A Real Son is Still Better. Grace Flowers, gazing into little snake's eyes, found herself unable to refuse. Soft-hearted as she was, how could she deny such a pitiful creature? With a sigh, she conceded, all right, you can stay. But I must find what I'm looking for before I can take you back to Fairy Mountain. Yay, little snake. Mother agreed to let you stay. We can play together now. Jason Lawrence, upon hearing Grace Flowers' consent, immediately grabbed little snake, his voice filled with glee. Watching the child and little snake's joyful interaction, Grace Flowers smiled. A thought struck her: she should take advantage of Justin Lawrence's absence from the princely estate to search for the Phoenix Chalice. And so, one adult, one child, and one little snake spent the entire day practically turning the prince's residence upside down, yet the Phoenix Chalice remained elusive. How strange. Where could the Phoenix Chalice be hidden? Grace Flowers frowned, her inability to locate the Phoenix Chalice a source of frustration. She didn't know the chalice's significance to the mysterious individual. As an archaeology student, she only understood its archaeological value, its potential to bear witness to a dynasty's rise and fall. The historical documents provided by Professor Douglas didn't elaborate on the Phoenix Chalice's role within the dynasty, only briefly mentioning its shape and patterns. Generally, artifacts included in historical records held significant importance. Being such an important artifact, Justin Lawrence would undoubtedly keep it well hidden. It seemed finding the Phoenix Chalice would be no easy task. Lost in thought, she heard approaching footsteps. Looking up, she saw a young maidservant walking towards her. Your Highness, the young master's clothes have arrived. The steward asks if the young master could try them on to see if they fit, the maidservant inquired respectfully, her voice soft. Grace Flowers glanced at the peculiar outfit Jason Lawrence was wearing. Yes, a change of clothes was definitely in order. Justin, come try on your new clothes, Grace Flowers said to Jason Lawrence. Jason Lawrence rose from the grass, brushing off the blades clinging to him. He looked down at his current attire, a hint of reluctance in his voice. Mother, I think these clothes are really cool. Can I wear them every day? I don't want to wear new clothes. Children need to be clean. Wearing the same clothes all day will make them smell, Grace Flowers said, taking the child's hand and gesturing for the maidservant to lead the way. They followed the maidservant to a bedroom prepared for Jason Lawrence, where 2 neatly folded sets of clothes lay on the bed. Grace Flowers casually sat on the soft bed nearby and instructed the maidservant, help the young master try on the clothes. Yes, Your Highness, the maidservant nodded and approached Jason Lawrence. Wait, Jason Lawrence suddenly walked over to Grace Flowers, his expression serious. Mother, you must take care of little spirit for me. Don't lose it. Little spirit? Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow in confusion. Jason Lawrence reached into his large pocket and pulled out a green object, holding it tightly in both hands as he offered it to her. As the object neared, a snake's head suddenly poked out, flicking its tongue. Grace Flowers recoiled in surprise. "Mother, you promised little spirit you'd take it home, so you have to take care of it," Jason Lawrence declared with an air of adult responsibility, as if lecturing Grace Flowers. "Ah, isn't this little spirit? Young master, please don't harm little spirit." Upon seeing the small green snake in Jason Lawrence's hand, the young maid exclaimed, her tone suggesting she had encountered this little snake before. "You've seen this snake before?" Grace Flowers glared at the little tyke. What kind of son would try to scare his own mother like this? This child was definitely not hers. "Yes, everyone in the manor has seen little spirit. It appeared here 6 months ago. At first, seeing its entirely green body, some said this type of snake was highly venomous and feared it would bite someone and cause harm, so some wanted to kill it. But later, this snake saved our manor. Everyone believed it was a spirit snake that came to protect us, so no one wanted to catch it anymore." The young maid explained thoroughly. "Saved the manor? How so?" Grace Flowers became intrigued. A small snake like this saving such a large manor was truly rare. Chapter 14, The bath is ready. 2 months ago, during a dry spell, our woodshed caught fire for some unknown reason. Fortunately, little spirit woke up the servants sleeping in the room and led them to the woodshed, allowing them to discover the fire in time. By then, more than half of the woodshed had burned, and with the strong wind and months without rain, if the fire had been discovered any later, it would have been a disaster. The young maid looked at little spirit with awe, as if revering a deity. She continued, "Little spirit waited until we extinguished the fire before disappearing. Since then, we haven't seen it again, and I didn't expect it to appear today." The maid looked in astonishment at the small snake in Jason Lawrence's hand. This little snake had never let anyone near it, yet now it was lying obediently in that small hand, which she found strange. Grace Flowers pondered, staring at the small snake. Little spirit. It seemed that finding the Phoenix Dragon Goblet wouldn't be easy. Perhaps this spirit snake could help her in her search. With this thought, Grace Flowers, for the first time, boldly looked directly at the small snake. Looking closely, she found it quite cute, with a slender body, a round head, and large, round eyes. Its mouth, unlike other snakes' frightening, flickering tongues, was tightly closed, even slightly curved upwards, looking at Grace Flowers with an extremely flattering expression. It looked like a Q-version toy snake, very adorable, making it hard not to feel a bit of affection for it. Suddenly, a few light coughs came from outside the door. Upon hearing this familiar cough, Grace Flowers knew it was Justin Lawrence, who had tormented her all night. The door opened, and Justin Lawrence's tall figure appeared. "Father, you're back." Upon seeing Justin Lawrence, the little tyke trotted over to him and said cheerfully, "Cough, cough, did you have fun today?" Justin Lawrence covered his mouth with his slender, white fingers and coughed a few times. "Yes, father. Look at my little spirit, this is mother's new pet today." The little tyke proudly presented the small snake in his hand to Justin Lawrence. Justin Lawrence glanced at Grace Flowers, who was sitting beside them, and saw her looking at him with obvious disdain. A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. Grace Flowers met Justin Lawrence's gaze, observing his frail appearance and the way his right hand covered his mouth as he coughed lightly. Even with his illness, his exceptional beauty remained undiminished. People's hearts always softened towards beautiful people and things. Seeing the maid beside them looking worriedly at the coughing Justin Lawrence, it was clear how many people Justin Lawrence had deceived with this frail appearance, gaining their concern. However, these people did not include her. Grace Flowers shifted her position, a slight frown creasing her brow due to the discomfort between her legs. A hot glint flashed in Justin Lawrence's eyes. "Have you two had dinner yet?" Justin Lawrence suppressed the hot glint in his eyes, coughed lightly, and asked. It was completely dark, indeed dinner time. Reminded, both the little tyke and Grace Flowers rubbed their bellies simultaneously, suddenly feeling hungry. Go prepare dinner. Seeing their actions, Justin Lawrence lowered his eyes, hiding a smile, and then instructed the maid. Yes, Your Highness. The maid nodded, bowed, and retreated. The servants were very efficient, and in a short while, dinner was ready in the dining room. After dinner, Justin Lawrence went to the study for some unknown purpose, while Grace Flowers took the little tyke for a stroll in the garden. Grace Flowers looked up at the sky, the stars dense, large, and bright, with a clear full moon hanging high in the sky. Such a splendid night sky was rare in the modern city, and she couldn't help but be mesmerized by it. Behind her, light footsteps approached. Grace Flowers withdrew her gaze and turned to see two young maids. Your Highness, young master, the bath is ready in the bedroom. The two maids bowed to Grace Flowers and said respectfully. All right, let's go. Grace Flowers nodded. She had spent almost the entire day searching for the Phoenix Dragon Goblet, working up a sweat, and now felt sticky and uncomfortable. At the door of the bedroom prepared for Jason Lawrence, a young maid softly said, Your Highness, allow me to attend to the young master's bath. Very well. Your Highness's bath is also ready in your bedroom. Please bathe first, before the water gets cold. Chapter 15, This matter, no need to economize, Jason, get some rest after your bath, don't play with little spirit too late. Grace Flowers advised, this child could communicate with the spirit snake, and now Jason adored the spirit snake. During their walk earlier, the boy and the green snake chattered incessantly. I know, Mother, don't be jealous. Little spirit says it loves you the most, I'm only second in its heart. Jason Lawrence pouted, glaring at the spirit snake coiled around his hand. He was clearly the one who discovered it first, yet it claimed to love his mother most, which truly saddened him. Grace Flowers chuckled, glancing at the little spirit snake, which was nodding vigorously to please her, seemingly confirming the little boy's translation was entirely accurate. Go take your bath now. Grace Flowers couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Following the maidservant to the bedroom and entering the inner chamber, upon seeing the carved wooden bed draped in crimson silk, Grace Flowers recalled last night's passionate encounter on it, and couldn't help but blush. In the center of the room sat a large bathtub, almost big enough for 3 people. Floating on the water's surface were things that looked like medicinal herbs, and a herbal fragrance emanated from the tub. Grace Flowers stirred the water with her hand, it was indeed filled with medicinal herbs. Yet, despite the herbs, the bathwater remained clear, with a few rose petals floating on the surface. The herbal scent blended with the rose fragrance, creating a pleasant aroma. Why are these herbs added? Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow in question, asking the 2 maidservants attending her. Your Highness, these were specially brought back by His Highness, who instructed us to prepare the bath for you. These herbs can alleviate any discomfort in your body. The older-looking maidservant respectfully replied. Grace Flowers felt a stir in her heart, her favorable impression of Justin Lawrence increasing another notch. Your Highness, this medicinal bath must be taken while it's hot. If the water cools, the medicinal properties won't be as effective. The senior maidservant, seeing that Grace Flowers hadn't yet given them permission to help her undress, softly reminded her. You may leave. Grace Flowers waved her hand towards the 2 maidservants, dismissing them. Yes, we will wait outside. If your Highness needs anything, just call us. The younger maidservant nodded and then withdrew. Grace Flowers undressed and stepped into the bathtub, lying back lazily with a sigh of contentment. The warm water enveloped her body, combined with the scent of herbs and roses. After just a few minutes of soaking, she felt her slightly aching body relax considerably. These herbs were truly miraculous, Grace Flowers couldn't help but admire. As the water gradually cooled, Grace Flowers stepped out of the bath feeling refreshed. Seeing her clothes neatly folded on the bed, she put on the sleepwear-like garments that had been prepared. Just as she finished tying her sash, she heard footsteps approaching from outside, along with the voices of the two maidservants. "Your Highness." The younger maidservant greeted Justin Lawrence. "Ahem, why aren't you attending to the princess inside?" Justin Lawrence frowned, seeing the younger maidservant standing outside the room. "Her Highness is bathing inside and said she didn't need us to attend her." The younger maidservant quickly replied. "Very well, you may leave." Justin Lawrence nodded. Justin Lawrence dismissed the maidservant with a wave of his hand and then pushed the door open, the blended fragrance of herbs and roses wafting into his nostrils. On the large, ornately carved crimson bed, Grace Flowers, with her long black hair cascading down her back, reclined languidly, her gaze following the sound of footsteps. The tall figure of Justin Lawrence, with slightly damp black hair, as if he had also just bathed, appeared at the entrance to the inner chamber. Grace Flowers sat up straight, intending to have a clear conversation with Justin Lawrence. She found his feigning illness in front of others, yet being perfectly healthy in private, very strange. Her intuition told her that Justin Lawrence was definitely not as simple as the rumor suggested. "Ahem, my princess, do you feel more comfortable after bathing in the medicinal water?" Justin Lawrence elegantly covered his mouth with a light cough, his footsteps not pausing as he walked directly to the bed and sat down. "Cut the act, there's only the two of us, you don't need to pretend to be frail anymore." Grace Flowers rolled her eyes in annoyance. What was the point of continuing the charade in front of her? My princess is indeed intelligent. It is my 3 lifetimes' fortune to be able to marry such an astute and beautiful woman. Justin Lawrence, upon hearing this, wasn't surprised nor angry. Instead, he gave a captivating smile that could almost topple nations, no longer displaying the frail appearance from before. His entire demeanor shifted, his gentle and harmless aura transforming into something wild and domineering. "Less sweet talk, I just want to know why you're faking illness, even in front of Leo Harper and the other sworn brothers. Don't tell me even your imperial father and mother don't know you're actually perfectly healthy." Grace Flowers' expression turned serious as she stared intently at Justin Lawrence, not missing any change in his expression. "Economizing." Justin Lawrence, upon hearing Grace Flowers' question, his expression unchanged, simply uttered the word economizing. "Economizing? What do you mean?" "Ah," Grace Flowers cried out as she felt the world spin. By the time she could react, she was pinned to the bed by a powerful, warm, and masculine body. #### Chapter 16, Behave, Don't Move. Princess Consort, I'll have plenty of time to explain this matter to you later, but right now, it seems we shouldn't miss this precious spring night. Justin Lawrence's gaze was deep and burning as he stared at Grace Flowers beside him. "Bastard, let me go. You won't touch me tonight." Grace Flowers fumed. Now that her inner strength wasn't sealed by Leo Harper, he wouldn't get his way so easily. She lifted her head, but was startled by the burning intensity in Justin Lawrence's eyes. Just as Grace Flowers stiffened, Justin Lawrence pressed a pressure point on her body, and she instantly felt her body go limp, devoid of strength. Despicable. You used a pressure point on me. Now, although she could move her limbs, she couldn't use her inner strength. Even if she struggled, she wouldn't have any strength. Grace Flowers glared, gritting her teeth. This damned scoundrel, she had been tricked by him again. "Princess Consort, if I didn't use a pressure point, would you obediently stay still?" Justin Lawrence smiled, ignoring Grace Flowers' sharp, knife-like gaze. He wasn't a man patient with women, and for many years, he hadn't felt a flicker of emotion for any woman. But last night, he felt a strong stirring for this little lass, which surprised even him. He didn't know if this unprecedented feeling was related to Leo Harper, but now, fully conscious, he still felt a strong pull towards the little lass before him, a pull that reached his very core. "Get off me. Don't touch me." Grace Flowers took a deep breath, using her weakened hands to push the man beside her. She felt like she couldn't breathe under his intense gaze. Perhaps it was his usual sickly appearance that gave people the impression of frailty. Only she knew how strong this man's body truly was, his physique like that of a bodybuilder. Justin Lawrence saw the blush on Grace Flower's cheeks, a hint of worry in his eyes. This little lass's body seemed more delicate than other women her age. He would have to treat her well. After all, this woman before him was the only one who had stirred his emotions in so many years. Little lass, it seems I'll have to fatten you up a bit. Justin Lawrence sighed, loosening his grip on Grace Flower's hand. Get out. Taking advantage of the moment he wasn't fully controlling her, Grace Flowers drew up a leg and brought her knee up without hesitation towards Justin Lawrence. Oof, the blow made Justin Lawrence cry out. He could feel the force of this little woman. She dared to treat him like this. Did she want to murder her own husband? He turned, gripping both of her hands tightly. He had to make this little woman fall for him. Stop. Grace Flowers knew her strength against Justin Lawrence was like a kitten's, completely ineffective, but she couldn't help but resist. Little lass, do you think I can stop now? Justin Lawrence said, looking at the woman before him with a smile. Chapter 17, the sun's already kissing your backside. Knock, 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 a series of loud knocks shattered the harmonious warmth. Father, mother, wake up. The sun's already kissing your backside. The knocking was accompanied by a child's shouts. My, young master, why are you knocking on the prince and princess consort's doors so early? A servant, seeing Jason Lawrence knocking, hurried over to stop him. To wake up father and mother, of course. Jason Lawrence pulled Little Spirit, the snake, from his pocket. Little Spirit, quickly crawl through the window and wake mother up. Mother said she would take me out today. Little Spirit shook its head. I am a noble spirit snake. How can I perform such a lowly act as peeping? No, no, absolutely not. This isn't peeping. I'm just asking you to go in and wake mother up. Jason Lawrence, seeing that Little Spirit, who always obeyed him, refused to help this time, pouted, dissatisfied, and corrected Little Spirit's mistaken thinking. Entering without the owner's permission is peeping. Little Spirit still refused to go. Moreover, Justin Lawrence wasn't someone to be trifled with. If it sneaked in now, it might be thrown out before even getting close to the bed. Stingy thing, you won't even do this. Humph. Jason Lawrence glared at Little Spirit, cheeks puffed out in a sulk. Shoo, young master, be quiet. Don't disturb the prince and princess consort. The servant, seeing the young master talking loudly to the snake, hurriedly spoke. Just as the boy and snake were arguing at the door, the two inside were awakened. Grace Flowers opened her tired eyes to see Justin Lawrence's devastatingly handsome face gazing tenderly at her. This gentle, watery gaze, one that could probably charm anyone from an 80-year-old woman to a 3-year-old child, didn't faze Grace Flowers. She moved her body and felt as if her bones were about to fall apart, causing her to frown and let out a pained groan. I apologize. I lost control last night. Did I tire you out? Justin Lawrence gently stroked the stray hairs on Grace Flowers' face, his words filled with gentle remorse, but the satisfied smile on his lips betrayed his true feelings. Once he touched this little lass, he didn't know what restraint was, as if it was never enough. Tormented by you all night, do you think I'm tired or not? Grace Flowers clutched her waist, glaring fiercely at Justin Lawrence. She probably didn't even have the strength to walk now. Justin Lawrence was even wilder than on their first night. She, the passive one who didn't need to exert herself, had fainted several times from exhaustion, while he kept waking her up. This feeling was perhaps a mixture of pain and pleasure. Grace Flowers couldn't help but glare at Justin Lawrence again, this glare carrying a seductive charm she herself didn't realize. Her cheeks were still flushed from their lovemaking, and this lazy, alluring appearance made Justin Lawrence's heart flutter. A wicked smile played on Justin Lawrence's lips as he reached out, embracing her soft, slender waist, gently pulling her closer. "Father, Mother, wake up. The sun's already kissing your backside." Jason Lawrence's insistent knocking and shouts echoed from the door. Justin Lawrence got up, put on his outer robe, and went to the bathing tub Grace Flowers had used last night. After a night, the water had become ice cold. Justin Lawrence dipped a hand into the tub, his deep, night sky eyes closing slightly. Grace Flowers watched Justin Lawrence's every move with confusion, unsure of what he was doing. After a minute, Justin Lawrence remained in the same position. Just as she was about to ask, steam began to rise from the bathing tub. "All right, this water should be just warm enough for you. After soaking overnight, the medicinal properties will be even better. Soak for a while, and you won't feel any more pain." Justin Lawrence finally opened his eyes and returned to the bed, scooping the still-naked Grace Flowers out of the blankets and gently placing her in the tub. The perfectly warm water immediately enveloped her aching body. Grace Flowers looked at Justin Lawrence in astonishment. He had just used his internal energy to heat this tub of cold water by at least 40 degrees. How much internal energy did that take? And although Justin Lawrence had expended his internal energy, he didn't look the least bit tired. Just how deep was his internal energy? It was probably unfathomable. Grace Flowers was about to voice her question when Justin Lawrence placed a slender finger on her parted lips. Chapter 18, Good Girl. Little disciple, I know you're full of questions. With your intelligence, you've surely guessed there's a reason I'm feigning illness and concealing my martial arts. I'll tell you everything later, but not now. So don't ask why. When the time comes, even if you don't ask, I'll tell you. Justin Lawrence looked deeply at Grace Flowers. These were all things he had planned long ago. He didn't want his little disciple to be implicated. Grace Flowers met Justin Lawrence's gaze, knowing that since he'd said this much, she wouldn't be able to pry any more information from him. Oh well, she was here to find the Phoenix Dragon Goblet. As for the matters of this nominal husband, well, actual husband too, she should pay less attention. As long as it didn't affect her search for the Phoenix Dragon Goblet, it was fine. Good girl. Justin Lawrence bent down and gently placed a kiss on Grace Flowers' forehead. Grace Flowers scowled. Was this lecherous man treating her like a child? The knocking on the door grew louder and louder, as did Jason Lawrence's urging. I'll go deal with Jason. You soak a little longer. Justin Lawrence finished dressing, instructed Grace Flowers, and then walked towards the door, leaving Grace Flowers deep in thought in the bath. The prosperous capital truly lived up to its reputation as a flourishing land at the foot of the great Jin dynasty's emperor. The majestic street architecture, the various shops, and the stream of gorgeously dressed people all demonstrated the wealth and peace of the great Jin dynasty. Inside a crowded tea-house, a storyteller who looked to be about 50 years old was passionately recounting recent major events that had occurred in the great Jin dynasty. The guests listening to the story were completely captivated. Grace Flowers and Jason Lawrence sat in a corner of the tea-house. The storyteller paused at the most crucial, suspenseful moment, declaring with a, "If you want to know the details, please listen to the next installment," that today's storytelling session had ended. Grace Flowers beckoned to a waiter. The waiter hurried over and enthusiastically asked, "Miss, what can I do for you? Please call the storyteller over here for me." Grace Flowers spoke as she handed the waiter a few coins. "Yes, miss, please wait a moment." The waiter took the money, overjoyed. Although the young lady was still young and her clothes were quite ordinary, she exuded a noble air. Coupled with her generosity, she must hail from a wealthy family, the waiter thought. With an even more enthusiastic smile on his face, he turned to invite the storyteller. Not long after, the waiter led the storyteller over. "This young miss, may I ask why you've summoned this old one?" The storyteller was somewhat puzzled to see that the person who had called for him was a young lady who looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. "Sir, please sit." Grace Flowers smiled faintly and gestured to the storyteller. "It's like this. I want to ask you some questions about the Great Jin dynasty. For example, who is the most formidable in the Jianghu, or which are the influential noble families in the Great Jin dynasty? And what is the situation at the imperial court?" Grace Flowers poured the storyteller a cup of tea, set the teapot down, then took a small piece of silver from her sleeve and placed it in front of the storyteller. "Why does a young lady inquire about such trivial matters?" the storyteller asked, surprised. "Everyone knows a bit about these things, but few specifically ask. I've always lived on the mountain with my master, never venturing down. I'm completely ignorant of affairs below. Now that I've finally descended, I overheard you seem well versed in recent events. I thought I could ask you directly, saving myself the trouble of investigating and learning who to avoid. It would make my journey through the Jianghu much smoother." Grace Flowers smiled. Leaving her estate, she intended to understand the current state of the Great Jin dynasty. Happening upon this tea house and its storyteller, she figured, in these times, storytellers are the ultimate gossipmongers, the perfect source of information. "I see, I understand now." The old storyteller suddenly grasped her meaning, without suspicion, and proceeded to thoroughly explain the current situation of the Great Jin dynasty to Grace Flowers. Chapter 19, Not Watching a Ruckus is for Chumps. Currently, in the Great Jin court, besides the supreme imperial family, two powerful clans maintain the balance of power. First, the Carter clan, founding fathers of the Great Jin, always hold high positions, a deeply rooted force to be reckoned with. Second, the Sima clan, recently favored by the emperor, has seen its members steadily promoted, rivaling the Carters and significantly shifting the power dynamic previously dominated by them. This is likely the emperor's way of checking the Carters' growing influence. Outside the court, three clans reign supreme: the Flowers, the Bennets, and the Woods. The Flowers, Grace Flowers' own family, are masters of the martial arts world, commanding respect throughout the Jianghu. The Bennets monopolize all Great Jin trade, even handling imperial shipments. The Woods, a legendary clan, built their empire on brothels, controlling every such establishment in the Great Jin dynasty. Wherever there are men, there's a fragrant house, a Woods-owned brothel. As Grace Flowers listened intently, a commotion erupted outside. "Ah, mother, someone's fighting over there. It's a young girl." Jason Lawrence, hearing the noise, scrambled to the window, peering towards the disturbance. The storyteller was taken aback that this small child, seemingly only a few years old, called a young girl mother. "Mother, I want to help that sister." Jason Lawrence, his face indignant, jumped out the window and ran towards the noise. "Sir, let's end here for today. Farewell." Fearing for Jason Lawrence, Grace Flowers left the tea house, pursuing him. A crowd gathered before a pawn shop. In the center, a short, fierce-looking man gripped a 12 or 13-year-old girl, trying to remove a jade bangle from her wrist. Strangely, despite the girl's frail appearance, the bangle seemed fixed to her wrist, refusing to budge. The man's efforts only reddened and scraped her skin. "Wench! You dare steal my bangle? I'll beat you to death." Unable to remove the bangle, the short man slapped the girl, sending her tumbling to the ground, a bright red handprint blooming on her cheek. "I didn't steal it. My mother left it to me." The girl, who had endured silently, glared at the man with hatred. Despite her injuries, she refused to cry. "I raised you, fed you, clothed you. Your life is mine, and so is this bangle." The man pulled a gleaming knife, spat on the ground, and roared, "Take it off. Or I'll chop your hand off to get it." "Sir, this is a matter of life and death. Reconsider." The pawnshop owner pleaded, not wanting bloodshed at his doorstep. Unfazed, the man glared at the girl, squatted, and yanked at her hand, which she kept behind her back. Seeing his intent, the crowd grew agitated, criticizing the man. "Shut up. One more word and I'll chop you all." He brandished his knife at the crowd. Though sympathetic to the girl, they feared for their own safety, their criticisms fading. "Wench, you brought this on yourself." The man grabbed the girl's retreating hand, his eyes greedy for the jade bangle. He raised his knife. The crowd gasped. Amidst their screams, he swung the knife down towards the girl's arm. Chapter 20, Mother said, "Draw your sword when you meet bad guys, stop." Amidst the crowd turning away, unable to bear the sight, a child's voice rang out. Everyone turned their heads to see a handsome little boy, about 4 years old, emerge from the crowd and stand beside the little girl, glaring angrily at the short man. "Which brat is this? Get lost." The short man, recovering from his momentary surprise, saw it was just a child and dismissed him with a wave of his hand. "Little one, come here quickly." A woman, seeing the adorable child unaware of the danger, and intervening, feared for his safety and called out to Jason Lawrence. "Let go of my sister." Jason Lawrence said sternly, unafraid of the fierce look on the short man's face. "Which little punk is this, daring to interfere in my business? Tired of living, huh?" The short man swung his dagger-wielding hand towards Jason Lawrence, intending to push him away and continue snatching the bracelet. But when his hand reached the child, it was gripped tightly by the boy's small hand, rendering him immobile. The short man stared in astonishment at Jason Lawrence. How could this little tyke possess such strength? A child barely weaned was holding his hand so tightly he couldn't move. "You're a bad guy. Justin isn't a punk. Justin has a father and mother." Jason Lawrence shouted angrily, his grip unwavering. "Let go." "No. Mother said to draw my sword when I see injustice. You're hitting this sister, you're a bad guy, and Justin must draw his sword when he sees a bad guy." Jason Lawrence blinked innocently. "You little brat, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just taking back what's mine." The man didn't want to tangle with a child, but those small hands held him fast, the throbbing pain in his wrist intensifying. This sister said her mother gave her the bracelet. Just like when mother gives Justin things, they're Justin's. She doesn't want to give it to you, so you're stealing. Stealing means going to jail. You. The man hadn't expected this child to be so difficult. The surrounding crowd, seemingly captivated, began to murmur again. Looking at Jason Lawrence's cute little face, he softened his tone, "Little one, be good. Just let go of me, and I'll buy you candy, okay?" Jason Lawrence shook his head. "No. Mother said I shouldn't take things from strangers. I'll get kidnapped and sold far, far away." "What do you want, then?" The short man's expression grew more menacing. Jason Lawrence seemed oblivious to the man's fierceness, his voice clear and soft. "Let go of my sister, and I'll let go of you." "Fine." A malicious glint flashed in the man's eyes. He released the little girl and grabbed Jason Lawrence's arms, lifting him up and throwing him hard to the ground. Chapter 21, OP Son A. A horrified scream ripped through the crowd. This man, how could he lay hands on such a sweet child? Just at that critical moment, whoosh. 2 small stones, seemingly out of nowhere, whizzed through the air, striking the short man's wrists. A sharp pain shot through his hands, forcing him to release his grip. Jason Lawrence spun gracefully, landing lightly on his feet. The stunned onlookers, still reeling from the sudden turn of events, looked towards the small child. He stood firmly, waving at the crowd, calling out, "Mother, over here, over here." Following the child's gaze, they saw no response, but the crowd in that direction parted, creating a narrow path just wide enough for one person. A slender young woman, seemingly no older than 15 or 16, slowly emerged. Her face was cold, her entire being radiating a chilling aura that caused the crowd to instinctively step back, silently marveling. Just a young woman, yet possessing such a powerful presence, exerting such immense pressure. Mother, this bad man wanted to chop off sister's hand. Jason Lawrence helped the little girl, still prone on the ground, to her feet, indignantly reporting to Grace Flowers. What happened? Grace Flowers' voice was gentle, yet carried an underlying force that sent a chill down the short man's spine. In her hand, she toyed with a few small stones. Seeing these, the man's face darkened. From the force with which those stones had struck him, he knew this young woman's martial arts skills were formidable. Speak. Seeing the man's silence, Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow, impatience creeping into her tone. She hadn't intended to get involved, but this man had tried to throw Justin. This was no longer a matter of meddling. This little bitch stole my bracelet. I was just teaching her a lesson. The short man blurted out. You're lying. This bracelet was left to me by my mother. You stole it to pawn it for your gambling debts. The little girl, now supported by Jason Lawrence, vehemently denied the blatant lie. Tell me, what happened? Grace Flowers looked at the little girl. Her patched clothes, the swelling on one side of her face, the clear imprint of 5 fingers, the blood at the corner of her mouth, the swollen hand with the bracelet, her whole appearance was pitiful. Yet, facing the man who had struck her, she showed no fear, only glaring hatred. It turned out this man was the girl's adoptive father. Her birth parents had died when she was 10. His wife, pitying the child, had taken her in. But the adoptive father was addicted to gambling. Having squandered their entire fortune, he set his sights on the little girl's only heirloom, a bracelet left by her mother. Today, while she was working in the fields, he had stolen the carefully hidden bracelet, intending to pawn it. Fortunately, the girl had discovered the theft quickly. Returning home to find the bracelet missing, she knew her adoptive father had taken it. She ran to the pawn shop he frequented and, sure enough, there it was on the counter in front of him, the owner already counting out the money. Without a word, she snatched the bracelet while he was distracted and ran. But he caught her at the door. Truly despicable. Grace Flowers said to Jason Lawrence, Son, I'll leave this man to you for practice. Let's see how much your martial arts have improved. Do as you please, just don't kill him. Alright, little spirit, let's go. Jason Lawrence eagerly stretched and limbered up, preparing for a fight. Miss, this child is so young. It would be a shame if he were hurt. An old woman, seeing the small child approach the short man, anxiously pleaded with Grace Flowers. Jason Lawrence walked up to the short man and beckoned him with a crooked finger. Hey, get up. I want to avenge my sister. A thoroughly adorable child challenging a grown man many times his size and age, and the woman he called mother actually condoning this suicidal act, it was unbelievable to the onlookers. The man stood up, but fear of Grace Flowers kept him from accepting the challenge. Besides, he was a grown man, losing to a child would be utterly humiliating. Hup. Ha. As soon as the man stood, Jason Lawrence unleashed a flurry of martial arts moves. Ah, young master, spare me, spare me. Despite his small stature, the child's punches, kicks, and strikes packed a surprising punch. In moments, the man was covered in bruises. Jason Lawrence's strange and unpredictable fighting style left him no chance to retaliate, only to endure. What kind of martial arts is this child using? Those in the crowd with some knowledge of martial arts were dumbfounded. Indeed, I can't tell what style it is at all. The person beside him watched intently. The moves seemed chaotic, yet flowed together seamlessly. Grace Flowers crossed her arms, calmly observing Jason Lawrence. Not bad. Sanda, Judo, Taekwondo, Tai Chi Chuan, all being utilized. And thanks to the spirit pearls from Little Spirit, his internal energy had greatly increased, compensating for his young age and small size. Those seemingly random punches and kicks, appearing like drunken boxing, were actually quite damaging. Grace Flowers smiled in satisfaction. The man's cries attracted more and more onlookers. Those unaware of the situation began pointing at Grace Flowers, their gazes filled with fear, as if she were some terrifying demoness. Grace Flowers looked at the man sprawled on the ground, then at the little girl. The girl showed no pity for the man's miserable state, only rubbing the bracelet on her wrist, with no intention of asking Jason Lawrence to stop. "Son, that's enough. Stop playing. Don't cause a death." Jason Lawrence retracted his fist, his anger sated. He shook his fist at the man, his childish voice carrying a warning. "If you ever bully my sister again, I'll beat you like this." I won't dare, never again." The man, no longer the cruel bully who had tormented the little girl, curled up on the ground, tears and snot streaming down his pig-like, swollen face. A truly pathetic sight. The little girl suddenly walked over to Grace Flowers and knelt down with a thud, kowtowing as she spoke. "Miss, I am willing to sell myself to you, to be your slave for life. Get up and speak." Grace Flowers noticed the flash of malice in the man's eyes towards the little girl. She knew that if he returned home, he would undoubtedly abuse her again. "Don't you want to go home? Where is your adoptive mother?" "My adoptive mother passed away last year." Speaking of her adoptive mother, the little girl finally burst into tears, glaring hatefully at the man. It was his gambling that killed her. Grace Flowers pondered for a moment. It seemed returning home would only bring the girl more suffering. She would see this good deed through to the end. She tossed a small silver ingot towards the man, her voice cold. "This is for you. I'm buying this little girl. From now on, she has nothing to do with you. If I ever find out you've laid a hand on her, don't blame me for being merciless." Yes, thank you, miss, thank you, miss." The man's eyes lit up at the sight of the silver. He snatched it up, stuffing it into his shirt, afraid Grace Flowers would change her mind. "Get out." Grace Flowers waved him away dismissively. The man scrambled away in a panic. "You're free now, lass. You needn't fear his mistreatment any longer." Grace Flowers helped the kneeling girl to her feet, a wry smile touching her lips at the girl's grateful expression. "Though I said I bought you, I can't take you with me. You'll have to find your own way to make a living." She'd come to this time solely for the Dragon Phoenix Cups, wanting no emotional entanglements, no ties to anyone in this era. "Miss, please, I'll be very obedient, miss." The girl, accustomed to silence, broke out in a worried sweat at Grace Flowers' words, yet could only repeat her plea. "Take this money and live well." Grace Flowers handed her several strings of copper coins. She had silver, but such a sum on a young girl would only attract thieves. Better to give small denominations, enough for a while, than to have her kindness backfire. With that, Grace Flowers led Jason Lawrence away, intending to return to the tea house and continue her inquiries with the storyteller. A man dressed as a guard approached, bowing respectfully. "Miss Flowers, our young master awaits you at the Rich Flower Tea House. He sent me to escort you." "Your young master? Who?" Grace Flowers paused, the guard seeming familiar, yet she couldn't place him. Perhaps he knew the previous Grace Flowers, someone she had no impression of, hence the lack of memory. "Our young master is Philip Bennet," the guard replied, unfazed by her question. At the name, Grace Flowers' heart leaped, a missed beat, not her own reaction, but the body's. Philip Bennet? She closed her eyes, searching her memories. Images flashed through her mind like a film reel. The original Grace Flowers, timid, stood before a handsome youth, her downcast eyes betraying a maiden's shyness, stealing glances when he wasn't looking. Grace Flowers smacked her head. Ah, she knew who this Philip Bennet was. From the residual memories, he was the original Grace Flowers' childhood sweetheart, the object of her affections. That explained her heart's reaction. It seemed the original Grace Flowers was deeply smitten. Whether Philip Bennet reciprocated those feelings was another matter. However, the youth's gaze in the memories seemed ordinary, like looking at a neighbor's sister, devoid of romantic interest. Good. Grace Flowers breathed a sigh of relief. She wouldn't be burdened by the original's romantic entanglements. "Miss Flowers, this way, please," the guard prompted, seeing her pause. Chapter 22, Your Highness, the princess consort says you're half dead. "Yes, let's go." Grace Flowers nodded, seemingly unable to avoid it any longer. Originally, she hadn't wanted any contact with Philip Bennet to avoid anything unusual being discovered, but now it seemed that intentionally avoiding him would only arouse suspicion. She followed the guard to a tea-house on the left side of the street. The tea-house was 2 stories high, the first floor being the main hall, already 7 or 8/10 full of patrons. Grace Flowers scanned the hall, but the guard continued past it to a staircase on the left. Standing at the foot of the stairs, he explained, "Miss Flowers, our young master is in a private room on the 2nd floor." No wonder she hadn't seen anyone resembling the man in her memory down here. Grace Flowers nodded and led Jason Lawrence upstairs. As soon as they reached the 2nd floor, a pleasant, magnetic male voice called out from a window, "Little Grace, it's been years. I never expected you to become so strong and bold." Not far from the window, a young man with a charming smile on his handsome face looked at her with amusement. His features were striking, with an air of carefree nonchalance. His black hair, tied high on his head with a jade crown, swayed gently in the breeze. A dark blue robe accentuated his tall, powerful frame. Grace Flowers narrowed her eyes slightly, silently assessing the man before her. He was somewhat different from her memories. 3 years ago, Philip Bennet had left the great Jean dynasty to travel and conduct business. Now, he appeared more mature and alluring than the image she retained. That roguish, almost smiling expression was undoubtedly captivating, likely charming countless maidens and women. No wonder she had been fond of him in her past life. "Little Grace, who is this little tyke?" Seeing the child Grace Flowers held, who bore some resemblance to her, Philip Bennet couldn't help but smile. "Is he your younger brother? I don't recall you mentioning having a younger brother before I left 3 years ago." "I'm not. I'm my mother's son, not her brother." Jason Lawrence's small face was serious as he corrected Philip Bennet. "Son." Philip Bennet's almost smile faltered, his eyes darting between Grace Flowers and Jason Lawrence. The child looked to be about 4 years old, but Grace Flowers had only recently married. "Where did a son come from?" "Yes, he's my son." Grace Flowers smiled, offering no explanation. She simply ruffled Jason Lawrence's hair and said, "Justin, call him Uncle." "Uncle," Jason Lawrence obediently said. Philip Bennet turned his gaze back to Grace Flowers, a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. In the 3 years they'd been apart, this young woman seemed to have transformed into a different person. Previously timid and shy, blushing even at a glance from him, she now met his gaze directly. He had practically grown up with her, and she had always been gentle, often bullied by her stepmother and stepsister without daring to retaliate. But witnessing the scene on the street earlier, if he hadn't recognized her, he wouldn't have believed that the bold woman who allowed her child to assault someone in public was the Grace Flowers he knew. "Little girl, you've changed a lot." Philip Bennet leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a glint in his eyes. This change in her was a good one, he felt, at least she wouldn't be bullied anymore. A powerful aura emanated from her. Time can change a person. The weak, incompetent Grace Flowers of the past is dead. The current me is the reborn Grace Flowers. It was fortunate that Philip Bennet hadn't seen her previous self in 3 years. Otherwise, her sudden change would definitely have aroused his suspicion. He wasn't someone easily fooled, possessing keen observation skills. Beneath that roguish, almost smiling facade was the sharpness and astuteness of someone who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. "Come, let's toast to our little Grace's rebirth." Philip Bennet laughed heartily, not dwelling on her words about death and rebirth. He simply took it as her having undergone a transformation over the past 3 years. The intelligence and wisdom in her clear eyes, the compelling aura she exuded, all suggested that she had truly blossomed from a timid, easily overlooked girl into a woman who commanded attention. Grace Flowers looked at Philip Bennet, a calculating smile gracing her beautiful face. She lifted her full wine cup with a hearty laugh and said, "Brother Fong, to you." Their cups clinked with a crisp sound, her smile echoing in the room. The Bennet clan was one of the 3 great families of the Great Jean dynasty. From their first meeting, she observed that Philip Bennet genuinely treated her like a younger sister. Perhaps she could use him to search for the Phoenix Dragon Cup. After all, in this time and space, she knew no one she could trust. With Philip Bennet, she might find it faster. This thought deepened the smile on her face. "Little girl, I heard the 3rd prince you married is sickly. Is that true?" Philip Bennet asked with concern. "Half dead, you could say." Grace Flowers shrugged, her lips curling into a pout. That pervert, Jialu Junxian, was perfectly healthy and tormented her almost every night. Seeing no trace of heartache or sadness on her face, Philip Bennet felt reassured. She had truly changed, becoming resilient. "What do you plan to do with the little girl you saved the other day?" Philip Bennet, seated facing the stairs, asked, looking towards them. Grace Flowers turned to see the girl standing motionless on the stairs, head slightly bowed, like a statue. "I gave her some money to make her own way." Grace Flowers frowned. She had underestimated the girl's stubbornness. Did she think she could just follow her everywhere? She sighed, her head aching. Interfering in other people's affairs was a mistake. Philip Bennet was about to speak when the guard behind him suddenly stepped forward and whispered something in his ear. "Grace, I have to go. If you need anything, send someone with a message." "I won't be leaving the area anytime soon," Philip Bennet said, rising to his feet. "All right, go ahead." Grace Flowers nodded, breathing a sigh of relief. Earlier, she had been unsure how to search for the Phoenix Dragon Cup, but now, meeting Philip Bennet, she saw a glimmer of hope. "Mother, aren't you bringing little sister home?" "Our house is so big," Jason Lawrence said, noticing the girl. "Son, speaking of this, as your mother, I need to impart some proper understanding." Grace Flowers recalled Justin's impulsive attempt to rescue the girl. Fortunately, this time it was someone without martial arts skills. If they had encountered a vicious expert, the little boy would have been badly beaten. Jason Lawrence shrank back, seeing Grace Flowers' serious expression. He was more afraid of his mother than his father. From now on, no matter what happens, think carefully before acting. Sometimes, force isn't the only solution. You need to use your wits. You're just a little boy pretending to be a hero. If you're ever this reckless again and something happens, I won't care. "I won't need a son like that," Grace Flowers warned. "Mother, Justin's martial arts are very powerful." Jason Lawrence arrogantly raised his small chin in rebuttal. "Your cat-scratching martial arts, how powerful can they be?" Grace Flowers snorted coldly. Although this little guy was young, his execution of various martial arts techniques was quite proper, almost considered a martial arts prodigy, but she couldn't praise him. This little guy couldn't handle praise, his ego inflated as soon as he was praised. Jason Lawrence pouted, placing the coiled spirit snake on the table, reproaching it, "Little spirit, mother is so fierce, you should stop following her." Little spirit turned its head to look at Grace Flowers, its large mouth curved upwards, its slightly bulging round eyes blinking, its expression fawning and flattering. "Traitor, at this time you should comfort me, not go and flatter mother, you really don't know how to be human." Jason Lawrence turned little spirit's head to face him, speaking with great dissatisfaction. "I am a spirit snake, not a human, so as a human, I don't know how to be human. Little spirit stuck its snake tongue out at Jason Lawrence, wriggling its snake body. Grace Flowers looked at the person and snake in front of her and laughed. Put little spirit away, don't scare people. Grace Flowers stood up and said, come on, let's go out for a stroll. It was still early, just the right time to familiarize themselves with the surroundings. It seemed she would be staying here for a while. Grace Flowers led Jason Lawrence across the bridge. The little girl, seeing Grace Flowers walking towards her, her face still swollen, showed a look of joy, raising her eyes expectantly at Grace Flowers, hoping she would take her along. Little girl, I've already told you, I won't take you with me, don't waste your time with me, you might as well find something to do with this time, you have to rely on yourself to make a living in the future. Grace Flowers stopped, knowing that this precocious little girl would definitely understand what she was saying. After speaking, she didn't look at her again, and walked down the stairs. Miss. The joy on the little girl's face was replaced by disappointment. Looking at Grace Flowers' back, she bit her lower lip and followed again. At noon, the sun was still blazing. A carriage stopped beside Grace Flowers. Your Highness, the sun is getting stronger, would you like to return to the residence to rest? The guard on the carriage respectfully addressed Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers looked towards the little girl who was watching her from afar. For as long as she had been strolling here, the little girl had been following her at a distance neither too close nor too far, not coming forward to pester her, just silently following, giving her a headache. All right, let's go back. Grace Flowers conceded, it seemed she had to ditch this little girl. Only when she left would this little girl give up hope. She was now in her teens, working as a maid in a wealthy household would definitely allow her to support herself. She didn't need to worry about this little girl not being able to survive, she felt that this little girl's survival ability was quite strong. A child who had suffered from a young age wasn't a flower in a greenhouse and knew how to live better. Mother and son boarded the carriage, and the guard drove the carriage slowly towards the Prince Xian's residence. Grace Flowers, sitting in the carriage, truly underestimated the little girl's persistence and willpower. She didn't know that behind the carriage, out of her sight, the little girl was still running after the carriage, showing an inclination to follow to the very end. Hashtag Chapter 23, Father's too poor, Mother must remarry. At 10 in the evening, a cool breeze stirred. Jade Flowers reclined beneath the spacious pavilion's railing, leaning against a pillar with her legs crossed. Mother, have some grapes. James Lawrence picked a peeled grape and offered it to Jade Flowers. My good son. Jade Flowers' voice was husky, as if she had just woken up, and she stretched contentedly. Having awakened at noon, she had come to the pavilion for a long nap, compensating for the sleepless night. She turned to the small maid waiting nearby. What's your name? Having been in the palace for 2 or 3 days, she still didn't know the name of this frequently attending maid. Princess, my name is Ruby Willow. The little maid, initially overlooked, was overjoyed by the princess's sudden attention. She quickly knelt and respectfully replied. Ruby Willow. Jade Flowers sat up, leaning against the railing, and observed the delicate, pretty maid kneeling beside her, who looked no older than 15 or 16. How long have you been in Prince Xian's residence? This servant was 8 when my parents sold me to Prince Xian's residence. I've been here for 8 years. Ruby Willow answered in detail. That long. Jade Flowers pondered. Yesterday, she had searched almost every room in Prince Xian's residence, but couldn't find anything resembling a treasure vault. Wealthy and powerful families would have dedicated rooms to display their valuables. It was impossible for Prince Xian's palace not to have one, unless Justin Lawrence's treasures were too secret. Perhaps this maid, Ruby Willow, knew something. Does Xian Palace have a treasure vault? Yes, Princess. Ruby Willow nodded. Then you must be very familiar with the layout of Prince Xian's residence, right? Was there a place she had missed? Ruby Willow nodded again. Mother, you're beating around the bush. Why not? Just ask if there's a treasure vault. Young James Lawrence immediately guessed Jade Flower's thoughts, unable to bear her roundabout questioning. Do you know if our palace has a treasure vault? Treasure vault? The maid looked at Jade Flowers, bewildered. Treasure vault, she echoed. It's a place where many treasures are kept, lily pearls, gold, ancient calligraphy in paintings, and other precious treasures. Princess, young master, I have never seen a separate room for storing treasures in Prince Xian's residence. Ruby Willow hastily shook her head. Mother, it seems father is too poor. He doesn't even have a treasure vault. Do you think we'll starve here? James Lawrence sighed dramatically. Right. Very likely. Son, do you want to find a rich man to be your father? Jade Flowers also sighed. Prince Xian's residence had no Phoenix Dragon Cup, and if Justin Lawrence didn't have it, her trip here was pointless. She frowned. No, tonight she had to ask Justin Lawrence if he knew about the Phoenix Dragon Cup. Mother, why don't you remarry and find a rich father for James so we won't starve? James Lawrence's mournful expression suddenly vanished. He eagerly sat beside Jade Flowers, trying to please her. Mother, why don't you marry that uncle we met today? I think he's quite rich and definitely won't let us starve. James, you're so materialistic at such a young age. This idea of yours about a rich father is truly important. Jade Flowers couldn't help but laugh. It seemed her education about money equating to a desirable father had been effective. Mother, you can't say that. Just being rich isn't enough to be James's father. He must at least be handsome and able to defeat bad guys. Look at father, he has no money and isn't healthy. I'm afraid he won't be able to support us or protect us in the future. I think the uncle today not only looks rich but also quite handsome, very suitable for mother, so I asked mother to remarry. James Lawrence shook his head, laying out his reasoning with surprising clarity. Son, that's a good idea. I'll consider it carefully. Jade Flowers nodded seriously, indicating she would genuinely contemplate the matter. Princess, young master, our palace is very rich. We will never let you starve. Princess, you mustn't remarry. Ruby Willow, innocently frightened by their serious discussion, spoke up, almost in tears. Their prince had finally married a princess. If it became known that the princess disliked him and wanted to remarry, where would that leave the prince's face? Moreover, Prince Xian's residence wasn't poor at all. The household expenses were several times higher than other princes, and the prince often distributed gold and silver to the stewards. Half the storehouse was filled with gold and silver. Looking at the little maid on the verge of tears, Jade Flowers tapped her chin. This joke had gone too far, these ancient people couldn't take a jest. Who wants to remarry? Ahem. A slightly weak voice came from beneath the pavilion. Below, Justin Lawrence stood with his back to the setting sun, dressed in moon-white robes, bathed in golden light. He looked like a frail, sickly god, ethereal and as if he might ascend to immortality at any moment. His weak appearance seemed genuine and humble, yet inexplicably evoked pity. Your Highness. Ruby Willow hurriedly stood and offered to help Justin Lawrence up the pavilion steps. Justin Lawrence raised a hand and waved her off, gripping the railings on either side. He ascended slowly, with apparent effort and difficulty. TSK, he was really putting on an act, his acting skills surpassing those of modern-day actors. He was definitely worthy of a Golden Horse Award for Best Actor. After just a few steps, his legs trembled, his forehead beaded with sweat, and his face became even paler. He looked as if he might collapse. Jade Flowers scowled, wanting to kick him. This scoundrel had nearly tortured her to death. She couldn't help but grind her teeth at this dying man. Under Jade Flowers' sharp gaze and the maid's worried eyes, Justin Lawrence finally reached her, seemingly exhausted, and sat down beside her with a sigh. Take the young master down to bathe first. I have something to say to the princess. Justin Lawrence instructed Ruby Willow. Yes, Your Highness. Mother, we've agreed. You should think about it tonight. As James Lawrence left, he didn't forget to remind Jade Flowers to consider remarrying. Jade Flowers broke out in a cold sweat. This little guy was serious. Little rascal, you've only been married a few days, and you already want to remarry? Could it be that I couldn't satisfy you tonight? Justin Lawrence leaned close to Jade Flowers' ear, his starry eyes hinting at an impending storm. His warm breath brushed against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. His suggestive words made her face flush. Such a pervert, would he dare do anything in a public place? Justin Lawrence's hand lifted her chin. Their faces only a finger's width apart, their breaths mingling. Aren't you afraid the servants will see you acting so out of character? Jade Flowers wanted to pull back, to create some distance, but found her waist firmly held. Justin Lawrence embraced her tightly, pressing her against him. Princess, do you mean, we should return to our chambers? Justin Lawrence grinned, suddenly sweeping Jade Flowers into his arms. With a light tap of his toes, he employed Qigong, soaring out of the pavilion. Ah! Grace Flowers, caught off guard by her sudden ascent, let out a short cry of alarm. Justin Lawrence's lips swiftly covered hers, stifling her scream. Suspended mid-air without any safety net, Jade Flowers' fear of heights intensified. She clung tightly to Justin Lawrence's neck, terrified of shattering into pieces should she fall. Eyes squeezed shut, the wind whistling past her ears, she dared not look down, her heart pounding at an abnormal rate. Justin Lawrence took advantage of her gasp for breath, his kiss deepening, capturing her evasive lilac tongue. Watch where you're going. Between shock and anger, Grace Flowers turned her head, struggling to break free from Justin Lawrence. She forced out a reminder against his lips, urging him to pay attention. She didn't want him looking at her, she wanted him to look where he was going. Before they found the dragon and phoenix cup, she didn't want to be thrown to her death in this strange time by this pervert. Finally, the wind died down, the trembling from being airborne ceased, and Justin Lawrence released her lips. Click. The door slammed shut. Click. The lock engaged. Grace Flowers opened her eyes, familiar decor greeting her. Back in her bedroom, no longer suspended in the air, she released her grip on Justin Lawrence's neck and gently rubbed her hands. She patted her chest, still racing. What's wrong with you? Having calmed down, Grace Flowers berated Justin Lawrence, whose icy expression had nearly stopped her heart. Ow! Thrown onto the bed without warning, despite the soft mattress, she felt her backside splitting in two. She roared, "Bastard, Justin Lawrence, are you sick? Did I provoke you?" Justin Lawrence pressed down on her, his star-bright eyes blazing with anger. "What are you looking at? Get off!" Grace Flowers struggled, attempting to throw him off, but he held her wrists firmly, her entire body pinned beneath him. Their bodies pressed close, she took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down and stop struggling. But then she realized the situation wasn't quite right. Chapter 24, This king is most pleased to serve his beloved concubine. Chapter 25, Little Spirit Spring, don't you have the dragon and phoenix cups here? I read in a book that they're exquisitely crafted, and I wanted to see them for myself. Grace Flowers asked directly, figuring if Justin Lawrence suspected anything, he'd just assume she'd read about the cups, not that she came specifically looking for them. Dragon and phoenix cups. Never heard of them. Justin Lawrence shook his head. What are they like? Do you have paper and a brush? I'll draw them for you. Grace Flowers frowned. Justin Lawrence's expression seemed genuine, he really didn't seem to know about the cups. But how could that be? Hadn't the professor said they were in Justin Lawrence's possession? Perhaps they were called something else here. Only in the study. Come, I'll take you there. Justin Lawrence took Grace Flower's hand and led her out of the treasury. He pressed a spot on the wall by the bed, and the wall seamlessly closed. In the study, Grace Flowers immediately sketched the dragon and phoenix cups from the professor's documents onto schwanching paper. She pushed the drawing towards Justin Lawrence, who sat opposite her. Have you ever seen cups like these? One cup depicted a soaring dragon, the other a phoenix in flight. Such distinctive cups would surely be memorable, perhaps even prized collectibles. Does the ancient text you read mention the history of these dragon and phoenix cups? If you like them, I can find them for you. Justin Lawrence watched Grace Flowers, her eagerness suggesting a deep fascination with the cups. It only mentions that they appeared in the Great Jin Dynasty, but not precisely when. They were likely made during that period. Grace Flowers wasn't entirely certain. The record stated the cups belonged to third Prince Justin Lawrence of the Great Jin Dynasty, but not how he acquired them. Had she arrived too early? Perhaps he hadn't obtained them yet. Then I'll keep an eye out. Justin Lawrence took Grace Flower's hand, gazing intently at her. Anything you desire, I will find for you. His eyes held depths Grace Flowers didn't want to explore. Having Justin Lawrence's help in her search was encouraging. Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. I am truly overwhelmed by your favor. Call me Xian. Justin Lawrence winced at the formal address, correcting her. Grace Flowers readily agreed. It was just a name, and if keeping Justin Lawrence happy meant he'd be more dedicated to finding the cups, so be it. All right, it's late. Let's rest. Justin Lawrence rose, glancing at the crescent moon hanging high in the window. The manor was quiet, the servants asleep, only the occasional patrol of guards disturbing the stillness. I'm warning you, I'm exhausted from this afternoon. I want to sleep tonight. Don't touch me. Grace Flowers also stood, wanting to establish some ground rules with this lecherous man. All right, you can sleep. Justin Lawrence nodded, leading her towards the study door, a suspicious curve playing on his lips. Grace Flowers didn't believe his easy agreement. It wasn't that she was paranoid, but Justin Lawrence was simply too enigmatic. Predictably, Grace Flowers' rules were disregarded. Despite the afternoon's passion, a young, vigorous man wasn't likely to ignore a beautiful wife sleeping beside him. Grace Flowers slept until the sun was high. Justin Lawrence was gone when she awoke, and Jason, perhaps instructed not to disturb her, hadn't yet come. Sitting up in bed, Grace Flowers ached all over. That scoundrel. Had Leo Harper's tonic given him superhuman stamina? Didn't he ever get tired? Clutching her aching back, Grace Flowers cursed under her breath. A knock came at the door, followed by Ruby Willow's voice. Your Highness, are you awake? May I come in and assist you with your toilette? Hearing movement inside, Ruby Willow, who had been waiting outside, spoke up. Come in. Grace Flowers lay languidly in bed. Ruby Willow entered, the lingering scent of intimacy causing her unmarried cheeks to flush. Seeing Grace Flowers lounging in bed, she asked, Your Highness, would you like a medicinal bath? No need. Grace Flowers glanced at the bathing tub, recalling the image of Justin Lawrence holding her as they soaked together, the memory sending a blush creeping up her neck. Yes, then I'll fetch water for washing. Ruby Willow turned to leave, returning shortly with a basin of warm water. Where's Jason? Grace Flowers hadn't seen him since waking. Young Master Jason is at the manor gates with a young girl. The guards say she arrived with Your Highness yesterday in the carriage. She wouldn't say who she was looking for, just sat near the manor, refusing food and drink. They say she stayed all night and nearly fainted from hunger this morning. Young Master Jason heard the commotion and went out. It seems he knows her. Ruby Willow explained in detail, curious about the girl's identity. Could she be a former playmate of Jason's? Grace Flowers' heart skipped a beat. She knew instantly it was the girl she'd rescued. The girl had waited all this time. Her tenacity was astounding. Have someone bring her in and prepare some food for her. Grace Flowers instructed. Yes, Your Highness. Ruby Willow nodded and left. In the main hall, several appetizing dishes were laid out. At the table, besides Grace Flowers and Justin Lawrence, sat a thin, frail girl, nervously clutching her clothes, glancing anxiously at Grace Flowers. Eat. We'll talk after you've had your fill. Grace Flowers gestured towards the food. Thank you, Your Highness. The girl gulped, ravenous, and began to devour the food. Whether from hunger or the novelty of such a feast, she ate nearly everything, her small frame belying her appetite. Slow down, don't choke. Jason cautioned, watching her eat. Grace Flowers rested her chin on her hand. Jason's spirit snake slithered out of his sleeve, across the table, and curled up in front of her, its large eyes blinking up at her adoringly. The snake's presence no longer sent shivers down her spine. It now seemed endearing. She extended a finger to touch it, surprised to find its body warm, not cold and slippery. Weren't snakes cold-blooded? Was this some kind of genetically modified snake? Little Spirit, delighted by Grace Flowers' touch, inched closer, its mouth curving into what looked like a smile. Mother, aren't you afraid of Little Spirit anymore? Jason, sitting beside her, exclaimed in surprise. Previously, his mother would wring her hands and look terrified whenever she saw Little Spirit. I'm trying to be friends with your Little Spirit. Because Little Snake had body heat, Grace Flowers' fear of this cold, soft-bodied creature lessened somewhat. Boo-hoo-hoo, its owner finally looked at it with normal eyes. Had its spring finally arrived? Little Spirit couldn't help but be moved to tears. Grace Flowers, seeing the excitement of both Little Spirit and Jason, laughed, shook her head, and turned to look at the little girl. The girl, having finished eating, set down her chopsticks, sat upright in her chair, and looked at Little Spirit without any fear. What's your name? Grace Flowers leaned back in her chair and asked the little girl. My name is Ivy Little, the little girl replied. Softly, looking anxiously at Grace Flowers. How old are you? This little girl was thin and frail, seemingly severely malnourished, making it difficult to guess her age. I'm 15 years old, Your Highness. Please take me in. I can do anything. Even if I can't serve Your Highness directly, I can be a rough maid. Ivy Little rose from her chair, knelt down, and pleaded. I wouldn't have guessed you were 15, Grace Flowers mused for a moment, then tilted her head towards Ruby Willow. Take her to the steward and see if there's a place for her to stay in the manor as a maid. Yes, Your Highness, Ruby Willow nodded and went to Ivy Little's side. Follow me. Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you, Your Highness. Knowing she could stay in the manor, Ivy Little kowtowed repeatedly in gratitude to Grace Flowers. As Ivy Little left with Ruby Willow, only Grace Flowers and Jason remained in the hall. Mother, shall we go out for a stroll? Jason, ever restless, always wanted to go out. Hashtag Chapter 26, feeling like hitting the jackpot. Mother wants to enter seclusion during this time. Grace Flowers mused. This world revered martial arts, and if she intended to stay here indefinitely, she must adapt to its survival rules. The primary reason Grace Flowers was bullied by her stepmother and stepsister was her status as a waste. Her martial arts were mediocre, even the household servants were more skilled. If her predecessor possessed formidable martial arts, no one would dare to provoke her. She had practiced martial arts since childhood and her skills weren't bad, but it wasn't the internal energy cultivation of ancient times. Compared to this world's martial arts, it was far inferior. According to the memories in her head, 3 years ago, her predecessor inexplicably gained enlightenment, her martial arts cultivation instantly soaring from the ground level to an unknown height. This world's martial arts cultivation was divided into 9 levels, each further divided into elementary, intermediate, and advanced. Experts surpassing the 9th level were rare in the Great Jin dynasty: Abbot Xianzhen of the Shaolin Temple, the reclusive martial arts senior Duge Laoren, and a mysterious figure whose identity remained unknown. In the past 3 years, her predecessor's martial arts cultivation had made a breakthrough, likely reaching the 5th level. For ordinary people, reaching the 4th level was already pushing the limits. Reaching the 5th level was truly a sign of exceptional talent. It was unbelievable that her predecessor reached the 5th level in just 3 years. If this were revealed, the Great Jin dynasty would undoubtedly hail her as a martial arts prodigy. Suddenly, a hazy image flashed through Grace Flower's mind, a memory from her predecessor. However, even the predecessor wasn't clear about this image. Could it be related to her sudden surge in martial arts cultivation 3 years ago? Wait, a secret martial arts manual. Her predecessor had a luggage bag containing several ancient books. 3 years ago, that hazy figure entered her room while she slept, leaving behind these manuals before departing. The figure continued to visit late at night, guiding her martial arts practice. Even her predecessor didn't know this person's identity, not even their gender, as they never spoke and always appeared in the shadows, leaving only a blurry image. She wondered if the manuals were among the dowry brought to the prince's mansion. The dowry, right. She had to go and check. Grace Flowers stood up. Ruby Willow, having finished arranging matters for Ivy Little, was entering the room. Your Highness, the steward said Ivy Little can stay and has made arrangements for her. Ruby Willow, assuming Grace Flowers wanted to ask about Ivy Little, spoke before she could inquire. Yes, Ruby Willow, do you know where my dowry is kept? She hadn't thought about her dowry since arriving several days ago and didn't know where Justin Lawrence had placed it. His Highness instructed that it all be placed in the West Chamber. I'll escort your Highness there. Ruby Willow said. They were all curious why the princess hadn't touched her dowry, which was incredibly lavish and filled the entire West Chamber. Mother, didn't you say you wanted to enter seclusion? Why are you looking for the dowry now? Jason Lawrence also stood up, asking curiously. Looking for a treasure. Grace Flowers said with a smile, following Ruby Willow for a while before arriving at the West Chamber. This Serenity Prince mansion was truly enormous. Your Highness, it's here, but this place is locked. Only the steward has the key. Please wait a moment, Your Highness, I'll go find the steward to open the door. Ruby Willow waited for Grace Flowers' nod of confirmation, then turned and quickly went to find the steward. Grace Flowers assessed the small courtyard where the West Chamber was located. It was elegant and refined, with pavilions, rockeries, and weeping willows. The winding paths made it a beautiful sight. Justin Lawrence didn't have a single maidservant, not even a personal maid. Did he want outsiders to think he was that seriously ill? He painstakingly feigned illness for so many years, what was it for? Asking him yielded no answers, he was secretive and clearly up to something. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted Grace Flowers' thoughts. Ruby Willow and the steward walked quickly towards her. Your Highness, I will open the door for you immediately. The steward respectfully bowed to Grace Flowers, then hurriedly took the key to unlock the room. Grace Flowers pushed open the door and was astonished to see the room filled with wooden chests. Don't tell her all of this was the dowry Henry Flowers had prepared for her. Truly generous, worthy of one of the 3 great families of the Jianhu, their wealth was abundant. Closing her eyes to think for a moment, the original owner had a very precious chest containing all the things she had treasured over the past 10 years. Those martial arts manuals were stored in that chest. It seemed to be vermilion, with begonia flowers carved on the surface. Grace Flowers opened her eyes and saw the chests piled on top of each other. She could only see the front row, and in this row, there wasn't the vermilion wooden chest she was looking for. Steward, call some people. Among these chests, find a vermilion wooden chest with begonia flowers carved on it. Grace Flowers instructed the steward. Yes, Your Highness. The steward nodded and turned to arrange for people to find the chest Grace Flowers wanted. Because the room was almost full of dowry items, to find the chest Grace Flowers wanted, they had to move all the chests inside out. Half an hour later, someone finally cried out joyfully, "Found it, found it." A young servant came out carrying a vermilion chest with begonia flowers carved on it. Yes, that's the one. Grace Flowers, seeing the chest for the first time yet feeling familiar with it, immediately nodded in confirmation and said to the servant, "Bring it to my bedroom." The young servant nodded and immediately carried the chest quickly towards the bedroom in the main building. "Your Highness, what should be done with these?" The steward looked at the dowry items piled up on the empty space in front of the room and asked. "Put them back." Grace Flowers had no interest in these dowry items. They were nothing more than silks, satins, gold, silver, and jewels. "So, the key to this room, Princess, do you need to keep it yourself?" If the princess had finished handling the dowry, and these things belonged to the princess, then this key should have been given to the princess to keep. "No need, you keep it." Grace Flowers shook her head, suddenly remembering something. "Right, go through all the items in the chest and see if there's anything usable now, like clothes, pick them out and bring them to me." Although Justin Lawrence had prepared clothes for her, it would be a waste to leave the clothes in the dowry unworn. "Yes." The steward nodded. Grace Flowers turned and walked towards the bedroom. If there really was a secret manual in the wooden chest, then it would be perfect. She could rely on it to learn martial arts here. One adult, one child, and a little snake stared intently at the vermilion-red wooden chest in front of them. "Mother, what's in this chest?" Jason Lawrence looked at the locked chest, curiously reaching out to touch it. "Perhaps a treasure." Grace Flowers fiddled with the lock. She'd have to find someone to pry this chest open. "Mother, do you want to open this lock?" Seeing Grace Flowers nod, he immediately volunteered, "Let me open it for you." "Can you do it?" "This lock is made of iron, how will you open it?" Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow, doubtfully looking at the adorable little face in front of her. "Since eating Little Spirit's pearl, my strength has grown tremendously." Jason Lawrence nodded affirmatively, grabbed the lock, and with a forceful pull, the lock, originally firmly fastened to the chest, was ripped off by Jason Lawrence. "I didn't expect this pearl could also increase strength." Grace Flowers looked towards the spirit snake, Little Spirit, coiled on Jason Lawrence's head. Little Spirit, seeing its master's attention directed towards it, excitedly blinked at Grace Flowers in a flattering manner. The sun still rose in the east today, but its master's attitude towards it had subtly changed, truly making it feel overwhelmed by favor. "Oh, Mother," Little Spirit said, "it wasn't an increase in strength, but in internal energy. I thought my strength had suddenly increased, but it turns out my internal energy has grown quite a bit." Jason Lawrence translated Little Spirit's words, a look of understanding dawning on his small face. Grace Flowers suddenly remembered that when she first met Little Spirit, it had said that the pearl it regurgitated could not only cure all poisons, but also enhance one's martial arts cultivation upon consumption. She wasn't very clear about the division of martial arts cultivation levels in this time and space. With the effects of the pearl, Jason's martial arts cultivation should have reached the second stage, right? No wonder he was able to injure a grown man several times his size yesterday. At the time, she thought the man was holding back because of her presence, not daring to retaliate against Jason. Looking at it this way, the man wasn't holding back because of her, but because he couldn't fight back against Jason. With Jason's current martial arts cultivation, let alone dealing with ordinary people with no martial arts cultivation like yesterday, even dealing with someone at the first stage of cultivation would be more than enough. "Mother, open the chest and see what treasures are inside." Jason Lawrence looked at the chest curiously, urging her. Shifting her gaze from Little Spirit to the unlocked wooden chest, Grace Flowers opened the heavy lid. Her eyes fell upon some trinkets and a circular object made of dried branches. Judging by the withered state of the branches, this thing had existed for at least several years. Grace Flowers looked at it, and some of the original owner's memories surfaced. The riverside scenery was vibrant, willows draped over the water's edge, and wildflowers bloomed along the bank. A young lass, merely 13 or 14, sat demurely beneath a willow tree, her head bowed shyly, yet occasionally stealing glances upwards. Perched on a willow branch, a seemingly carefree youth of 15 or 16 reclined, a faint smirk playing on his handsome face. With a casual air, he plucked several willow branches, swiftly weaving them into a circlet. He then tossed it downwards, seemingly at random, yet it landed precisely atop the young girl's head. Startled by the sudden object on her head, the young girl reached up, discovering a willow-woven crown. "Little Grace, this crown is for you. Gather some wildflowers from the riverbank and weave them into the willow, it'll make a right pretty garland." The youth smiled at the girl, who stared, mesmerized, at the circlet in her hands. He then rested his head on his clasped hands, closed his eyes, and said lazily, "I'll nap a bit. You go pick the flowers." The young girl's pretty face radiated joy as she lovingly caressed the willow crown, her bright eyes holding a barely concealed affection for the now sleeping youth. Chapter 27, Trivial Matters. Grace Flowers shook her head, dispelling the image. In her memory, the young girl was the original owner of this body, and the youth was Philip Bennett. As the memory surfaced, a strange, sweet, and joyful feeling stirred within her. Blast it, this body still held the original owner's memories, and those memories were affecting her emotions. She should have control over her own feelings by now. The original owner was just a memory, shouldn't influence her emotions. Could something have gone awry when the professor transferred her soul into this body? "Mother, what treasures are these?" "Just worthless trinkets." Jason Lawrence's disappointed voice interrupted Grace Flowers' thoughts. "And some old books." Jason Lawrence reached the bottom of the chest and pulled out a few worn volumes. The topmost book, aged and yellowed, had no title, only a plain brown cover. Grace Flowers picked up the books, 3 in total, all with identical covers. Opening one, she found anatomical drawings depicting the body's pressure points, each meticulously labeled with its function. Astonishment filled Grace Flowers. This was a manual on acupressure and acupuncture, detailing many lost techniques.